Thank you. Please take a seat.
Chair.
Welcome to this meeting of Oxford City Council. Please note this meeting is being recorded and live streamed. Members, please make sure your phone is either turned off or silent, else donations are welcome to my charities, and you may leave and come back at any time, but please indicate to the clerk if leaving completely. I also anticipate we will go for a break at around 6:30 p.m. Please note, as Lord Mayor, I have the casting vote on any tied vote this evening, and I reserve the right to use this. Item 1, apologies for absence. Can I ask the committee and member services manager to announce any apologies that have been received ahead of this meeting?
Thank you, Lord Mayor. We've received apologies from Councillor Sanderson.
Thank you. Item 2, members, do you have any declarations of interest relating to business in today's agenda? Linda, would you like to declare?
Yeah, I'm declaring an interest in Part 3, Item 13A, as my register of interest.
And Councillor Wait?
Yeah, sorry, Councillor Humberton.
Councillor Humberston has also sent apologies. Thank you. And Councillor Thomas?
Yes, on the leisure item in motion, I have an interest in that I work for We Own It, which is an anti-outsourcing privatisation campaign group that is currently campaigning against the award of contract to Serco. So I'll leave the room if we don't have anything to do with that.
Thank you. Okay, members, if any subsequent interests become apparent, please raise it at the relevant item. Moving on to item 3, which is minutes. We are asked to approve the minutes from the meeting held on Monday the 27th of November 2023. Do any members have any comments on the minutes? I therefore propose these minutes are an accurate record. Is there a seconder? Councillor Fry? Thank you. Are the minutes approved?
Aye.
Thank you. The minutes have been approved. We now come to item 4, announcements. This month I have attended 2 events I would like to share with you all. The first is Prayers for Peace, organised by the Ahmadiyya Muslim community. This event took place on Saturday the 13th January at Rose Hill Community Centre. It was attended by local MP, councillors, different faith leaders and local community representatives to pray for peace in Gaza. Last Sunday, the Oxfordshire Together for Humanity event was also held and hosted by Oxfordshire Civic Community. Civic officer holders, faith leaders from the county attended this as part of a series of national events, drawing together communities in friendship, understanding and peace to remember those affected by the conflicts in Israel and Gaza and across the world. I'm now moving on to announcements from the leader of the council, please.
Thank you very much, Lord Mayor. So just to add that I was also at the Together for Humanity event. It was a very well attended event and I thought it was extremely well organised, so I'd like to thank everyone who's involved in it. But the main thing I'd like to make an announcement about is just to say to Council that following the passing information about Gaza at the last Council, I followed up all the actions that required me as leader, including the writing to America Mara, and asking if he would be willing to address the council. As I hope people were aware, he sent through a video, I think there must be a slight misunderstanding. He sent through the video, which was a Christmas message, which we did circulate to members. So we did follow that up, obviously, because the request from the council was to have something relate to council. And I'm afraid we haven't had a response as yet. So just to remind you all and draw to your attention, that was circulated to all members, and that is the response that we've had so far. Obviously, if we hear anything else, we will let people know.
Can we also have request City Rector, if you would like to say a few words?
Thank you very much, Lord Mayor. Good evening, everybody. Lovely to see you. And first of all, my apologies because I will need to leave fairly shortly this evening. This will be a slightly sober, sombre few moments from me, but I too was together for humanity and found it very moving. Also on Friday at the memorial event here in the town hall, similarly moving. As you know, because I say it often, I am so impressed with everything that councillors do to improve the physical welfare of people in our city. And whether that's education, transport, housing, whatever it is, I know you all work terribly hard. I'm also really struck by how, if I may say this, how you engage with people in public events or in conversations in texts. And I constantly see councillors seeking to draw out the best in people, even when there are disagreements, even when there are challenges. But you work so hard at that, drawing out the best from people, improving their characters. And to be honest, whatever we can do, housing, education, welfare, etc., at the heart of it, it's the character of people that will change a city. And that leads into one of my favourite quotes, which I come back to at this time of year. This was given by a principal of an American high school at the start of each year to his teachers. And if anybody doesn't know, the reference to Eichmann, Adolf Eichmann was one of the architects of the Holocaust. This is what he used to say each year to all his teachers. I am a survivor of a concentration camp. My eyes saw what no person should witness. Gas chambers built by learned engineers, children poisoned by educated physicians, infants killed by trained nurses, women and babies shot by high school and college graduates. So, I am suspicious of education. My request is this: help your children become human. Your efforts must never produce learned monsters, skilled psychopaths, or educated Eichmanns. Reading, writing, and arithmetic are important only if they serve to make our children more human. As we seek to serve our city and people of all ages here, may we be given grace to help everyone become more human and the character of kindness, compassion, justice to grow. Thank you, Lord Mayor.
Thank you. Yeah, and there's no other announcements from other officers or office holders, so I'm now moving on to public addresses. I now move to item 5, public addresses and questions that relate to matters for decisions at this meeting. I can confirm we've had received none ahead of this meeting. We now come to the first recommendation from Cabinet. Councillor Ed Turner, Deputy Leader and Cabinet Member for Finance and Asset Management. Can you move the report and Cabinet recommendations?
I'm afraid it's me. Rent and service charges are the main form of income for our housing revenue account, the HRA, which is our ring-fenced fund for delivering council house services. And over the next 4 years, we expect to spend nearly £217 million on running housing and property services, including repairs and the recruitment of additional staff in order to help meet new standards which will be required from us under the Social Housing Act. We also intend to spend nearly £645 million on HRA capital projects, which include adaptations, improvements to homes and estates, bringing in more energy efficient homes, bringing in homes up to the thermal efficiency standards which we need to help meet our obligations towards carbon reduction in the city. As well as delivering more affordable homes in a new generation of council-owned homes. I appreciate these are difficult times for many people, including our tenants, but this rise of 7.7% is necessary in order for us to keep pace with inflation and continue much needed investment in our council homes. And I think it's important to remember that even after this rise, the average council rent will still only be £129.72 a week. So that's less than £520 a month, which I think is very good value for money. Yes, so as the report is clear, if we agree any rise which is less than inflation, then that will have a detrimental impact on the viability of the HRA and really risks us being able to provide the high quality landlord services to tenants, which I think we would all expect this council to be providing. So I move this report. Thank you.
Thank you. Can we have a seconder? Councillor Turner.
Thanks, Lord Mayor. And if I may speak briefly, endorse everything that Linda said in moving the recommendations. I just wanted to direct Council's attention to recommendation number 4 on the garage rents. It was a good point picked up at Scrutiny, and I see Councillor Fry is smiling. Well, he might, because he raised it. Raised it very well. He noted that initially the recommendation was to go for a garage rent rise of 7%. We felt it was right for there to be parity between the places for people and the places for cars and other belongings, and so we're also recommending 7.7% here to Council.
Thank you. Is there any other speakers? Councillor Mundy.
Hi there. So I just want to comment on the rent increases there. So it's very disappointing, obviously, to see the maximum allowable increase being imposed on the poorest residents in our city, who are those most likely to be renting our social housing. It's also notable that there was a very, very slim amount of consultee responses from people who do live in our council homes as council tenants. So I do wonder if the mover would like to comment on that. But as a result of the fact that this is obviously impacting the poorest people in this city, first of all, for that reason, really, I myself would have to abstain on this report. And I do appreciate that there's a lot of money at stake, but I will have to abstain. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Smodgen.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. A very quick administrative question and then a more substantive one. On the admin front, I note that there is a discrepancy between the report, which says what Councillor Turner just said about the 7.7% for garages, and the agenda as stated on the website, which says 7% flat. Obviously, it's small amounts in total, but we should cross-check that the right version is the one that's happening. And then the substantive question is, does the question for the proposing cabinet member is, do you agree with me that it is regrettable, deeply regrettable, that the council ends up in this situation, and that what we really needed to see here was central government intervening to prevent the completion of an inflationary spiral, to see central government intervening to say that councils are able to raise their rents by what you might call an ordinary inflationary amount, 2%, for example, and to provide appropriate buffer funding to interrupt that inflationary spiral there, and in particular that we need to see similar commitments and similar promises from the government in waiting, so that we know that we're not going to be in this situation when we come back to this council meeting next year.
Councillor Linda Smith, would you like to reply?
So in terms of the process question, the briefing note, I believe, contains an updated version of the report with the 7.7% applied to garages as well. On people on the lowest incomes, of course our rents, the social rents and affordable rents are still well below the local housing allowance rate. So people whose rent is paid through benefits, it will still be covered. And of course, universal credit is going up by 6.7% next year, pensions by 8.5%. Yes, of course, I'd like to see more government investment made available to councils like ours to build new homes and to invest in current stock. That's something we can all call for, and if that was necessary, if that was available, then perhaps we wouldn't need to put rents up so much in future. So yeah, I join you in wishing that was the case, but we have to deal with the situation that we've got at the moment.
Councillor Smartin, can you turn your mic off, please? Jonathan, can you please clarify the 7.7%?
Certainly. Just to let you know, the 7.7% figure is published as part of the briefing note, which is published on Friday. So the correct figure should be available.
Councillor Ijaz Rahman, would you like to speak?
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Given the council's drive in the transport policy, I find it disappointing that we had to get intervention from Council Pride to get the garage car spaces up to something with 7%. I would have thought that maybe that should be a lot higher, and that may increase people not to use cars and not have cars. It's just a comment on the
Councillor Turner, would you like to respond?
In truth, and apologies, I may not have thought that quite right acoustically. We can catch up on it after. But I mean, just where we are with this, we've got the council garages. Obviously, we've got to strike a bit of a balance because it's good to see them used. It's good to get the cars off the roads, and that's great. Unfortunately, sometimes they're not used, and actually the next report will come on to that and some of the opportunities that exist when they're not used. And the truth is as well, modern cars are getting bigger, and so sometimes they just don't, they don't work. One way of looking at it would be we could go for a really stonking increase on the garages. I think we then have more vacant ones and more cars on the road. Another would be we could halve the garage rents. We get less money, and then we probably have more take up. We just, to be completely honest, the way this came about was that officers had an early stab at what the government guidance was going to be in terms of rent increases, and they went for 7%. In the end, the government guidance was 7.7 for the houses, and James, who's a very wise person, as you acknowledge in your question, raised the point at the scrutiny, and we're always interested in what scrutiny says, and we picked up on it, and we're doing it. The net upshot, I think the net benefit is some £7,200 a year. So that is the full technicolor detail on the garage rents. But if it hasn't covered off the question, maybe we'll catch a word and break, something like that.
Thank you. Councillor Linda Smith, would you like to sum up? Or Councillor Saj Malik, you've got a question.
Thank you very much. I got a comment actually, I don't need to ask a question. I think if it was point by point, I would have voted for the garage increase, but I will not vote for the rent increase. And it is a time when the ordinary Joe is struggling for their end meets. And it is a time when the people are really going through very bad economical pain. And what we doing as a council is, instead of giving them a relief, we're making them more burden. And as in her presentation, Linda said, we need to use X, Y, Z money to improve our housing, etc. It's the same council who have many times sat here and basically claim the credit how they're improving their housing stock. I think instead of telling us where the money is required and try to make a case, it's not. Because they should not have kind of where I have opposed before, like vanity project, they're going to do the resurfaced car park front of the ice rink. When you got the opposite £500,000 that is. I mean, they got rid of those vendors by next to the Odeon Cinema, where 90 grand plus year was coming. And the Odeon Cinema is 2 to 3 years far away. So that's nearly £270,000. The Oxford taxpayers are worse off. So if you were doing your competence and not wasting the money, the project I just realized, so that's nearly £750,000 you would have it. So therefore, this is the wrong time to bring this increase. I will not abstain, I will oppose this. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there any more questions of those who haven't spoken?
My question wasn't answered, Lord Mayor.
Oh, okay.
On the consultation responses, Lord Mayor.
Councillor Linda Smith, would you be able to sum up and answer Councillor Ed Mundy's question?
Yeah, on the consultation responses,
that is something actually, I think it's something we need to do a lot more of, is tenant involvement and engagement. That's one of the requirements I was referring to when I said about the new requirements for the Social Housing Act, and that's something that the additional staff that we are recruiting into landlord services, that's something, an area where they will be working, so I hope we will be getting much better at that.
Summing up, so if I could just remind Council of what I said to begin with, this is about a housing revenue account, a ring-fenced account, with rents coming in, and money can only be spent on our housing services. So it's separate to the general fund. We can't take general fund money, the money that you're talking about being used for the car parks or anything else, and then use that on our council homes. Yeah, we're limited to the money that's in the housing revenue account. It's separate. I'll leave it at that now. Thank you.
Okay, I will put the decision to the vote. Please can I ask that members keep their hands raised until I indicate otherwise. Those in favour, please raise your hands. Those against? Any abstentions? Thank you. The recommendations have been approved. We now come to the second recommendation from Cabinet. May I remind members that appendices 1 and 2 to this item are exempt. If any member wishes to discuss any exempt information, it will be necessary for the Council to pass a resolution to exclude the press and public from the meeting. Councillor Linda Smith, Cabinet Member for Housing, can you move the report and recommendation?
Thank you. Yes, I'm very pleased to move this report. This is something before I was on Cabinet. I was an area of work I was very keen to see progress, and that's because these sites, the benefit of developing is twofold really. It's not just an opportunity to provide much needed affordable housing, but often these backland garage sites, often as we've just heard, a lot of the garages aren't used. They can become derelict and then attract antisocial behaviour, fly tipping, abandoning cars. So I think it's something that it's a really important area of work for those two reasons. So we've successfully applied for over £340,000 from government to bring forward these 5 sites to get them ready for development. There's no planning permission yet for them, so we don't know exactly what we'll be able to provide there, but we anticipate building approximately 30 new affordable homes. So the sites are Underhill Circus in Barton, Leiden Road in Wood Farm, and 3 in Blackbird Leys. The plan is for the homes at Underhill Circus and Leiden Road to be delivered through the housing revenue account, but we're trying something innovative with the Blackbird Leys sites and working with Oxfordshire Community Land Trust. So they will be developing the homes. Something that I was very keen to ensure is that those homes, they will be social rent and they will be allocated through our choice-based letting system. So going to local households in housing need. So with that, yeah, I'm very pleased to move this report. Thank you.
Can we have a seconder, please? Councillor Ed Turner. I believe Councillor Miles would like to speak.
Thank you. So support the proposal set out here. But I did want to clarify one thing, which is with the community. Sorry, with the community project that you said, the community-led building work, would any be offered as self-build for those who are in housing need? Because that might be something that people would want to progress.
Is there any other questions, or could you get the answer for that?
No, this isn't self-build. Oxfordshire Community Land Trust is an organisation which will deliver the housing. So it's not self-built. But I mean, it differs from regular social housing. It's community-led housing, so there will be elements, and people will need to be aware of this, the tenants will need to be aware of this when they're bidding for these properties and before they sign any tenancy agreement. You know, there will be additional responsibilities which are different to being tenants for a regular registered provider. So there might be some communal areas or a communal garden where the tenants collectively take responsibility for the management of that space.
Councillor Fowler.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I'd just like to ask the Cabinet Member to clarify the risks associated with this project, in that if the conditions of the grant are not met, I understand that the Department for Levelling Up and Housing, or whatever they're called at the time, can recall the grant. Is that something the Council should be aware of, and what is the risk that this could happen?
Yeah, that is a risk that if we haven't spent the money, then the money will be sat there ready to go back. So I think it's an acceptable risk. And the government grant is 340k across the 5 sites.
Are there any other speakers for this item? Okay, I will put the decision to the vote. Please can I ask that members keep their hands raised until I indicate otherwise. Those in favour, please raise your hands. Those against? Any abstentions? Thank you. The recommendations have been approved. We now come to the Council Tax Reduction Scheme. Councillor Ed Turner, Deputy Leader and Cabinet Member for Finance. Can you please move the report and recommendations?
Yeah, thanks, Lord Mayor. With pleasure on this one. So we've long been a local authority who, since the localisation of council tax benefit and the associated reduction, which was passed by the coalition government back in the day, we've maintained full support. We've went over to a banding scheme. That's worked well, and it's meant we can spend more of the money helping people rather than on administration. We propose to increase the bands in line with income rises, which seems the right thing to do. So that will give people continued support. I think members will be aware that, unfortunately, this is an area which in future years we're really uncertain whether we'll be able to to afford at the same level. But at this stage we want to, it's a priority for us. It's right to be supporting people on low incomes as much as we can with their council tax. This is the right way of doing it. So with that, I'd like to move the recommendations in the report, and of course I'm very happy to take any questions, comments, anything like that.
Thank you. Can we have a seconder? Councillor Susan Brown. Are there any other speakers for this item? Councillor Smart.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Can I ask the Cabinet Member to, I think, reaffirm what I think is this Council's position, excuse me, which is that concerning next year's CTR and the talk in the report relating to the potential changes to the bands next year that were consulted on this year, and specifically it talks about the 100 to 85% potential change, that alternatives to that will be given equal footing, if you like, as that process evolves over the course of this year, and that we will look very seriously at it as a council at cost equivalent measures that do the same thing in different ways.
Councillor Thomas, would you like to ask the question?
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Yeah, I would firstly like to say that this is a really proud thing that we do as a council, the 100% exemption for those worst off, and I think it is something that is particularly vital in Oxford as such an unaffordable city, one of the most unaffordable places you can live in the country. And I would also say that we really mustn't underestimate the difference a little can make. And unfortunately, seeing it going down to potentially 85% in future years, for me, there's a red line there, because that difference is huge for families who are having to make decisions that nobody should have to make, decisions that will affect the physical and mental health of the whole family, but particularly of children, which will shape their futures. I think it's worth thinking about the financial cost of those knock-on impacts. It's worth thinking in not a short-sighted way, but holistically about how important this exemption has been for the worst of people in our city, and to think about how spending money on schemes like this can save so much money in other services. For example, in our housing services, where we spend money on preventing homelessness, we save a massive amount on emergency hotel accommodation. And likewise, spending money on preventing people getting into huge debts can alleviate problems in terms of advice centres, other services that families are going to be using. So I think that it is money well spent to protect that 100% funding into the future, and more importantly, it's just at the heart of what we want to be doing as a council in a city that, as I say, is one of the most unaffordable in the country during the cost of living crisis, when other councils have similar schemes in place. So we will be voting against for that reason, but we respect the commitment to keep the 100% funding in the short term at the very least, but we would like to see that in the longer term as well. Thank you.
Any more speakers, please? Okay, so Councillor Turner, would you like to sum up?
Yeah, I'll respond to the comments. So Chris asked, and we talked about this a few times, Chris, about the design of the scheme for next year. I mean, essentially next year, what will happen is we'll have a financial envelope which is projected, which is relevant to Imogen's point as well. We'll have a financial envelope projected in MTFS, and we will then work to design a scheme, and absolutely we'll try and design it as best we can, and we certainly wouldn't say it's got to be 85% maximum reduction for everyone. No, absolutely open to looking at the bandings and how that all works. It will set a financial envelope that we can afford, and then we'll work to that. I mean, a couple of bits. I mean, one to Imogen, I would, before voting against this, I would look quite carefully at it's the recommendations that we are voting on, and the recommendations relate exclusively to the scheme next year. So it would be a shame if in seeking to make a point, which I'll come on to if I really sympathise with, about the scheme in future years, you voted against the full council tax benefit scheme for next year. That is what we are voting on today. In terms of where we are in the process, I mean, it would clearly be, this is something we are contemplating only with the greatest reluctance. With this, and indeed a couple of reductions in the communities area, I've certainly said that if we got a better financial settlement, I would like to see those being areas that we would change and we would make a different recommendation on. As colleagues will be aware, unfortunately that didn't happen and the government hasn't given us a better settlement, but we live in hope for future years, and I stand by that. I would like us to row back on this if we can. The sad paradox of our discretionary spend, and this is an area where we have discretion, is that we choose to spend money on the things that we care most about. And I think for many of us, helping people in poverty is one of the things that we care most about. The problem is, it's also in the world which we have ended up in as a country, one of those things where there is an element of discretion, whereas there are other things we're required by law to do. And so we find ourselves in a position where we unfortunately do have to look at unpalatable savings such as this one. We are absolutely open to alternative ways of saving money if they can be found. That would be great. But from what I've seen and the really hard work that officers have put in, I don't think there are going to be easy savings options to come up against this. But that's for next year. As I say, for this year, what we have is an even more generous, because of the increase in the bandings, an even more generous scheme than we've offered previously. So with that, I do hope Council will vote unanimously to support the recommendations which are tabled now.
I will put the decision to the vote. Please can I ask that members keep their hands raised until I indicate otherwise. Those in favour? Those against? Any abstentions? Thank you. The recommendations have been approved. The next item is questions for Cabinet minutes. Members, this item is restricted to 15 minutes. Item 9A, do any members have any questions relating to the minutes from the 13th of December? Councillor Ed Turner.
Yeah, I've got a question for Nigel Chapman actually, and it relates to the equalities work that we do. And it might sound a bit flippant, but I think it ought to be put on the record. Nigel may have seen that the government wrote to us. They're going to give us a bit more money, but they also wrote some really nasty, culture warsy stuff about councils wasting money on EDI in their workforces. They talked about us producing, I think they're going to call it an efficiency plan or something, to justify getting extra money in future. And I think what they wanted us probably to do, and the hint there was that we would say ways in which we would pare back our work on EDI in order to save money. So my question to Nigel is he as repulsed as I am by this tone taken by government ministers? Does he think that actually investing in having a diverse workforce is the right thing to do? And will he not be thrown off course by this rubbish coming from central government?
It's nice that the member gives me a good strong steer on the answer as expected. Absolutely. I mean, it is the cheapest shot imaginable, playing to the Tory right, to make a very small addition of funds, and it is a very small addition of funds, I suspect, contingent upon cutting back on our EDI work, which is actually central to our vision for the city. It's central to our vision for the kind of workforce we want. It's central to our belief in equality and diversity and inclusion. And therefore, I will not be deflected one iota, frankly, by this government, or anything very much, but least of all on this.
Thank you. Is there any other speakers? Councillor Miles?
May I just, for the record, just to congratulate the work, therefore, of the Council and all of us in progressing its work on diversity and inclusion. And for the record, just want to state this is the first Council meeting that we have had where we have proudly had pictures on the wall, increase the representation of women in the Council chamber, and I think that's something we should all be proud of, and it reflects the ethos of the Council. So I think congratulations to all of us.
Thank you for your hard work on that. I would like, if there's any more speakers, to please speak now. And then if members have any questions relating to minutes from the 30th of December, Councillor Smoten.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. It's a procedural question. Relates to the leisure procurement and specifically Scrutiny's recommendation about transparency. I wonder, does the Cabinet Room responsible agree with me that whereas presently the Scrutiny Committee gets to see a selective outline, an incomplete impression of the bids that are received in the course of such a process, that scrutiny, and I stress scrutiny, I don't mean councillors intervening during a procurement, I mean scrutinising the process after the fact in the way that it usually does, ought to be able to properly review the full bid submissions confidentially, as it must be, so that scrutiny can offer a meaningful check and challenge to the full process, as opposed to seeing the outline, the sketch details, which is what we've received on this occasion.
Councillor Smoten, just to clarify, is this with regards to the 24th of January minutes, or is it the 13th of December?
It should be the 24th, and specifically the procurement that was agreed a week ago.
Is there anyone else who wishes to speak for the 24th of January draft minutes? No.
Thanks, Chris. Probably because it's obviously technical and legal, I would seek advice from Emma on this one.
Please go ahead.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. So just to clarify, in terms of the bids that are submitted as part of the evaluation, the legal processes, they are evaluated by the officers that form the evaluation panel. We would be opening ourselves to challenge were they further assessed by members outside of that process with a view to re-evaluating the outcome of that procurement. I'd refer to Local Government Association guidance that makes it very clear that members should not be involved in the actual procurement process and evaluation itself, and therefore in terms of responding to that recommendation from Scrutiny, it reflected what is guidance for councillors in terms of procurement processes and their involvement.
Okay, thank you. We now come to questions on notice from members of council, but we've got a quick question, looks like, from Councillor Alex Hollingsworth.
It's a declaration of interest, Lord Mayor. I apologise, I hadn't read all the way down to question CN4, but as it refers to allotment sites and potential financial resources being allocated to allotment sites, I need to declare that I am the chair of Cripley Meadow Allotment Association, Oxford's largest, most dynamic and successful. So I don't think I need to leave, but I do need to put it on record.
Thank you very much. Has anyone else got any declarations they'd like to declare?
I should be clear, it's as chair of it, and therefore one of the responsible officers and trustees.
Councillor
Thank
Smith.
you, Lord Mayor. I haven't got such an exalted position with my allotment association. I have just a allotment folder, but there's a small one, significant, so it will have changed if need to.
That's okay, thank you. Councillor Louise Upton. Any more allotments? No, we don't need to know any more allotments. That was it. I'm just joking. Okay.
Sorry. I don't have an allotment, but I'm part of the community group. I don't know.
That's fine. That's fine. Thank you. Okay, so we now come to the questions on notice from members of council. I will begin with questions for the leader of the council. Councillor Miles, do you have a supplementary question regarding the Christmas tree?
Yes, thank you very much. Thank you for providing a response on that. But if you're unable to provide the breakdown of the cost of the Christmas tree, I wonder whether it would be able to be circulated the cost of the overall festive lighting for the city. And then specifically you state that some other city centre locations were explored, but it wasn't possible for these to be proceeded with. Which were those other locations, please? Thank you.
Well, for instance, one of the other locations that we looked at was Carfax, to see whether there was anywhere particularly cited there. There were a number, as I understand it, that were discussed with county council officers and looked at from the city council's perspective to see, as set out in the answer to the question, whether they met the various requirements, which obviously included the power supply and access, but also obviously not causing any problem with blockage to CCTV or highways and so on, and sight lines and all of these incredibly complicated things that I learned as I did a walk around with the very helpful city centre management and events teams that we have to look at when we are siting a Christmas tree. You wouldn't believe the number of things we have to take into consideration. And I think part of the problem was that it just became apparent fairly late in the day that it wasn't going to be possible to site it in a normal place in Broad Street because of the new arrangements of the market. So it is being looked at for next year. The whole contract is being looked at for next year in terms of lighting. It's actually up for tender. So that is something that's being looked at and around. I did a very good walkabout with guys at the City Centre Hackathon with that team to try and make sure that we get an even better display of lights moving forward and that we have the kind of decorations that we want to see in the City Centre.
Thank you. Councillor Gant, do you have a supplementary to your question regarding the overnight tourist levy?
Yes, please. Thank you very much, Lord Mayor. Thank you to the leader for a very helpful full answer. It's good to see that the council is pursuing many of the things that were recommendations in the Scrutiny tourism review, which was, I think, 6 years ago now, and was, of course, a model of wisdom and insight since I chaired it myself. Specifically, is this council actually working, with a group of other councils of similar cities to lobby government?
We haven't, I don't think we've set ourselves up as a group to do that. I've certainly had plenty of conversations with other council leaders on this particular topic, and we have looked quite closely at what some other councils have done. And actually, I was having a further conversation with somebody I had first met and discussed this with from Bournemouth just this weekend. So I think that there is more that we need to explore because there are a couple of options which exist at the moment that we could follow up. I'm not 100% sure yet that they would be absolutely right for Oxford, and I think there is still more that we need to do in terms of lobbying as well of current and future governments, so that we can make sure that we have the kind of tourism tax that we want and that will enable us to invest in the kind of things that we need to be able to invest in for our city centre. So, I'm thinking in terms of things like signage, which we know needs improving, and we have no money to do that really at the moment, or very little. But also, ideally we'd be able to put more money into public toilets in terms of maintaining them and potentially building new ones. But again, at the moment we do not have the funds to do that. So if we were able to get in sufficient funds through this means, something that's done across the world in many cities, I think that would be a really good step forward.
Councillor Jarvis, do you have a supplementary to your two questions regarding Oxford Brookes University?
No supplementary either.
Thank you. Councillor Aziz, as you have 5 questions to the leader on different topics, I will ask you in turn for your supplementary questions. First, do you have a supplementary regarding empty shops in the covered market?
No.
Councillor Aziz, do you have a supplementary regarding the council's support for small businesses?
No.
Thank you. Councillor Aziz, do you have supplementary diverse representation in Cabinet? A supplementary?
No.
And do you have a supplementary regarding the rising Palestinian civilian casualties?
No.
And finally, Councillor Aziz, do you have a supplementary regarding flying the Palestinian flag?
Yes. So my supplementary question is, can we get an idea of how long it's going to take to fix this flagpole, please? And what is the actual hold-up? And when was it first discovered that the flagpole was out of action? Because obviously this flagpole is used to fly flags for different occasions, so I find it concerning that the fact that this flagpole is out of action was not, excuse the pun, flagged earlier, and I would like to get clarity on how long it will take for repairs to take place, please. And the reason why I ask this question is because there is concern among some residents in our city that this council is trying to fudge flying the Palestinian flag. So I think for accountability and transparency, we need a clear response to this question. Thank you.
Sorry, well, firstly, I answered questions about this before Christmas on the flagpole, and in fact it has emerged since that the work that is going to need to be done to the roof, it's not actually to the flagpole, it's going to take quite a long time, because basically there is work that is going to be done to the roof in about a year's time, and this work will have to be done as part of that. The answer to your question is that we have taken one of the other flagpoles and are now using that to fly the flag at half-mast. We are basically, one of the flagpoles is out of action, we're using the other flagpole to fly the City of Oxford flag at half-mast instead, which is basically what we are doing in order to mark the whole situation in Gaza. So that is the answer to the question. And obviously, that flagpole was previously flying the Ukrainian flag, that has been taken down in order to do this, and we will have to vary flags until we are able to repair the roof, but it is not safe for staff to access the flagpole at the moment. So I have no other option other than to use this other different flagpole.
Councillor Shasta Aziz.
Yeah, so I'm very confused and baffled.
I think you don't get supplementary twice, sorry.
Okay, that's my question though, because can I come back to that point, please? About my question not being answered.
Is it possible you can email that?
Yes, of course.
Okay. Now questions for the lead member for Finance and Asset Management. Councillor Miles, as you have 7 questions to the Deputy Leader on different topics, I will ask you supplementary questions in turn. First, do you have a supplementary regarding selling gifts of the Council?
Yes, I do. So, does the council then have any documentation associated with the moral trophy and the personalised number plate for the council, explicitly stating conditions placed on these gifts?
The councillor will probably not be surprised, but will be reassured to hear that I don't keep them about myself personally. I have a track record of losing bits of paper, so I don't know, and I'm happy to find out. Drop me a line about any of these that you're interested in. I will ask and see what we've got. Let's leave it at that.
Do you have a supplementary regarding existing and future flooding costs?
Yes, thank you. The 70 to 80,000 spent on this recent flood is significant, and so given that we're likely to have more instances of flooding in the future, that is going to be a significant cost to us as a council if we're bearing that every time there's a flood. So has the City Council done any research into climate risk insurance to insure itself against these costs? Given that the UK is an expert in this as a country, has significant expertise in this area. Thank
Thanks so much. That's an interesting angle. We have an insurance contract. We go out to tender. I'm not aware that it covers this sort of thing, and of course you can see why it might not. But very happy next time our insurance tenders up to have a look at this or take on board any more. I mean, really, I'm hopeful that we may get compensated by the government for this one, and it would be frankly pretty outrageous if we didn't. It clearly isn't fair if individual councils, because of their propensity to flood, are exposed in this way. It's also, of course, incumbent on us to support measures like the Oxford Flood Alleviation Scheme, which will reduce the risk. And that's something which we can control, whether we support those schemes.
Thank you. Councillor Miles, do you have a supplementary regarding business rates?
Yes, I do. So the delinquency rate for business rates is significantly higher at the moment this year, about 15% higher. What's changed, and why is, has the council become weaker at collecting the rates in the city, or what's the reason for this significantly higher delinquency rate, please?
Yeah, that's what I can do. It's earlier in the year, so we haven't collected the final tranche of the final amount. So wait until the end of the year, and I think you'll probably find it's going to be pretty similar.
Thank you. Do you have a supplementary regarding empty council-owned commercial property? No. Do you have a supplementary regarding council-owned commercial property EPC ratings?
Yes, I do. Do you think it's acceptable if you exclude these commercial properties, the F and G, which are exempt, that you have a 71% of the council's commercial building stock rated EPC D and E, which is 3/4 of all commercial stock in the city? Is that acceptable?
It's an interesting question. Is it acceptable? I mean, that goes back to future budget, to previous budgets, and I mean, I don't recall a lot of spending changes proposed by other groups saying, well, we'd rather you didn't spend money on this thing because we'd like additional investment in commercial properties. In fact, if anything, I seem to remember the commercial portfolio was rather looked down upon, an investment in that in previous budget rounds. But who knows? Maybe it'll be different this year, Lord Mayor. I mean, it's a statement of fact. It is where we are. We have to invest in our commercial portfolios. We're guided by our asset management plans in doing that. We will do what we can, but I suppose I don't make an apology for not making investment in our commercial property the primary focus of all of our investment. We've got lots of other things that we're doing in the climate space, and also lots of other calls on our scarce funds. So we'll do what we can, and of course it will also guide our choices in the future when it comes to investment decisions and indeed property purchasing decisions. It reflects the situation that we're in.
Thank you. And do you have a supplementary regarding Summertown public toilets? And finally, Councillor Miles, do you have a supplementary regarding the fee from South Park used for firework displays?
Yes, I do. So I understand that the fee received was £3,150 for the use of the South Park for this firework event taking place. Do you have an estimated cost for the number of people that are spent on addressing the damage caused by the firework event, and wouldn't officer time be better spent on other activities? Thank you.
Yeah, so I'm afraid the South Park firework lead on this. Chebe is, I don't know if Chebe, Lord Mayor, if you'd be happy for Chebe to respond to that supplementary.
I'd be happy for Councillor Cherry-Mkonge to respond.
Sorry, I didn't get to the question.
Okay, so
the people hours, how much? So you've got a cost that we received £3,150 for allowing this firework event to take place, but because of the damage caused, there was a significant amount of time that I believe has had to be spent by officers on addressing the complaints and the remediation. Basically, was it worth it? Yeah, for South Park. And what is the estimated cost of the people time? Because that's a resource spent, I think.
Thank you so much. Obviously, we have provided a response there. At this time, you can't actually estimate because it's in the process, but the roundtable actually have committed to funding. So in short answer, yes, we are looking into it, but we can't estimate at the moment.
Councillor Pett, do you have a supplementary question regards to Meadow Lane car park?
Yes, I just wanted to ask, it's really great to see that there'll be a public update in early February. Going forwards, it would be excellent to know, could the council commit to keeping community groups, residents, resident associations, sports clubs, the various people who have been involved in the consultations so far, could they be kept up to date with what is happening, just so that there was public knowledge of the, what is happening with the process? And I think that the lack of that so far has been causing some of the frustration from local people.
Yeah, I think it's a really fair challenge, Lord Mayor. I think the difficulty is with this that an important regulatory authority, if I put it like that, has got a different view. And I think sometimes officers would want to try and get where they can sometimes first without that being in the public gaze. So before you sort of circulate an update saying, you know, this particular thing has happened, and then everyone gets quite passionate about it, sometimes you try and resolve things smoothly, and I think that will explain some of the radio silence. And also, sometimes officers need to be clear what the options are and need to scope them out. So, for example, before going in saying, we're going in for a planning application, you want to have gone through, you know, the pre-app, and you want to be sure that that was a sensible thing to do. But I do take on board the feedback, and I think we should bear it in mind. While it may not be possible to give a sort of running commentary on something like this, we do need to keep people informed. I think that's a fair challenge. But as I say, we tend to talk about this a bit at council meetings, but I'm very happy to pick up questions in between them as well, and we'll always try and respond courteously and thoughtfully.
Thank you. Now I shall take the questions for the Cabinet Member for Leisure and Park. Councillor Miles, I will take your supplementary questions in turn. Do you have a supplementary regarding cycle parking at the city-owned parks? Do you have a supplementary question regarding use of park contract requirements? Councillor Smoten, do you have a supplementary question regarding South Park remediation?
Yes, Lord Mayor, thank you. What is your current intended approach to the same event next year?
We are in discussion. We haven't concluded yet.
Councillor Morris, you have 2 questions to the Deputy Leader, and I will take your supplementary questions in turn. Do you have a supplementary regarding allotments, sites, asbestos?
Yes, Lord Mayor. I just wondered what the situation is with the report that I made some weeks ago with regard to broken asbestos in Court Place Farm allotments that was strewn across the park. I didn't receive a response, and I was just wondering whether that was a significant concern to yourselves to take any action on it.
If it is specific, then I will follow that up.
Councillor Morris, do you have a supplementary regarding grass cutting?
Yes, please. So if the grass cutting is, if they're unable to fund the additional cost of removal of the grass, can the council confirm, will they still follow the same policy of just cutting the grass at the end of the season and just leaving it to rot in big piles, or will they revert back to cutting more regularly so that it's not so thick and it spreads out more evenly? I mean, I don't know which policy would be better with regard to benefit to our plans.
Thank you so much. Grass cutting measures covers across the portfolio, so I'll refer this one to my colleague Nigel from the ODS to answer.
Councillor, there are basically two verge cutting regimes going on here. There's the one related to biodiversity. You have the list of grass cuttings there, and then you have where the grass is being cut once a year, and then you have the rest of the verge will be cut twice a year. Now, the reason why, provided that the budget being in part of our budget is approved, because as you know, the background to this is that the county council used to fund far more cuts of verges in the past. But last year they, for biodiversity reasons and others, reduced it very significantly. So we're having to balance things out very carefully here. What I do hope is that by cutting most of the verges twice a year, assuming the budget is agreed, that we will stop the very, very heavy growth earlier in the season, if you like, and that will create less of the problems like you saw on Marston Road, where there was an awful lot of blockages going on of drains and gullies because they're going to be cut once a year. So I'm hopeful that will be able to help the situation.
Thank you. Councillor Latif is not in attendance, so we're moving to the next one. The next question is for the Cabinet Member for Planning and Healthier Communities. Councillor Smoten, do you have a supplementary question regarding the Templar Square redevelopment?
Yes, Lord Mayor. Do you believe, in view of the response, do you believe there is a significant risk at the moment that the housing targets on that site don't end up being delivered, or do you think at this stage it's a matter of delay, but still confidence that they will be eventually delivered?
I wish I had a crystal ball that I could answer that question accurately with. I think I have to remain optimistic that they will be, because obviously they are in the next iteration of our local plan. So I can't give you more of an answer than that, but we will certainly be pressing, or our discussions with the developers there, we will be pressing for those to be built as soon as possible.
Councillor Fairweather, you have 3 questions to the Cabinet Member, and I will take your supplementary questions in turn. Do you have a supplementary regarding gardens being lost? Councillor Fairweather, do you have a supplementary to your questions regarding SUDS? Do you have a supplementary to your questions regarding contractor site access damage?
Yes, I do. What I've asked for here is discussions with the County Council as to how it might, as the Highways Authority, put in place measures to its consideration of planning applications. I don't see anything in the written response to say that any discussion is proposed or indeed happened in the past.
Well, I have to say, this is something that's absolutely infuriating, isn't it? It's a case in my ward where contractors have really damaged pavement and road next to a building site, and we've been badgering the county to try and force them to repair it. But I think, you know, that our legal powers are what they are, so we can ask the county to improve their enforcement of remediation works after a building has occurred, but there's not a lot more than that we can do. I will undertake to do that. Yep.
Thank you. Councillor Latif is not in attendance for the next question, so I'm moving to the next one. Next are the questions for the Cabinet Member for Citizen Focused Services. Councillor Miles, do you have a supplementary question regarding the data systems? Councillor Fairweather, do you have a supplementary question regarding the housing management system? Yeah.
Given the well-known scandal surrounding the Post Office Horizon system, I'm a little disappointed to see that the Council is relying on internal audit. Could I ask that the cabinet member considers having an external audit, given the large amount of financial transactions that this system processes?
Well, I think that's making a supposition, frankly, that the internal audit will not do a good job. There's no reason really to think that. So I think that this is a proportionate response. Of course, you know, in regard to complicated housing management systems and IT systems, you never rule out the issue of using an external auditor, but I don't think it should be part of the course also. That's an overwhelming case, and actually, based on the answer here and the system controls in place, and the level of scrutiny going on, I don't see the case for it at the moment.
Okay, Councillor Muddyman, do you have a supplementary question regarding the ODS work on floods? Councillor Pegg, do you have a supplementary question regarding driving to household waste management recycling? Councillor Rahman, do you have a supplementary question regarding ODS maintenance efficiencies?
Yes, I do. Thank you for the responses. Can you hear me now? Okay. Thanks for the responses, comprehensive. So in your opinion, are ODS efficient?
Yes, in a word, I think they are efficient, and actually when you look at the response from tenants in our council houses and flats to the speed and the quality of repairs, it's a very high figure. So you've got to put that also alongside the answer I gave you before. That doesn't mean everything is perfect, far from it, there are always things that can go wrong, but from what I see, given the sheer scale and volume of the repairs being done, and I compare that with the number of cases that I've raised with me personally, where people feel dissatisfied, it's a very, very tiny number in thousands and thousands of cases. So it's not 100% perfect, but it's a very, very good story.
Councillor Rahman, you have two questions to the Cabinet Member, and I will ask in turn for your supplementary questions for culture and events. Do you have a supplementary regarding Cowley Road Carnival?
Yes. Was that the first one?
Okay, would you like to have a question regarding South Park damage?
Yeah. I'm not sure if it is towards Jemima anymore, since Shirley has been answering the other questions. Since we've got 3,150 for the event, and the cost, I know that we haven't got a cost, but just by looking at the sheer amount of damage that was caused, it's going to be above that. So, in essence, it's going to cost us more to have the event than we actually received. And given the amount of fireworks that were used and the amount of cars that were driven in, do you think it's worth having this event with all the other stuff that we're trying to do with the pollution that it causes, and actually the cost it causes them, and the hassle that it gives to residents all around?
It's a very interesting question and a very important question, and one that we've been discussing in depth since the 4th of November. And what I can tell you is that at the moment the officers have just actually put together their report that we're going to be looking and discussing at the end of this week. That repairs are now being discussed and are being costed, and that not only do we have a Friends of South Park group that anyone's happy to come join, but we have a Save South Park group which has also come together and mobilised to ask exactly these questions. So we have to really now look at what we can do to repair the park, and going forward what sort of fireworks we're going to enable to take place.
Councillor Rahman, do you have a supplementary regarding Cowley Road Carnival?
Yeah, thank you. So it seems like where we're at with the carnival is where we were precisely this time last year. So do you think that it will go ahead? And is there anything more that we can do as a council to try and get it to go ahead, given everything else that's going on, to get the community to get joined up together would be really important, and I think that we need to, instead of just diverting the organisers towards grants and other fundraisers, actually put our hand in our pocket and make this happen this time, especially with everything that's going on, bringing all the communities together. Or the question is, do you agree with me?
My understanding is actually things are looking up at the moment, and the fact that there's a new chair of the County Carnival who has now put in this application to the Arts Council is a huge plus, and actually this wasn't the case last year. And if anyone knows of any organisations that like to support the County Carnival, then that would be terrific, because obviously we're very keen for it to take place, because it is a huge landmark event every summer.
And finally, questions for the Cabinet Member for Housing. Councillor Goddard, do you have a supplementary question regarding rented housing inspections? Councillor Miles, do you have a supplementary for either of your 3 questions regarding Green Square Accord?
We'll test this, Mike. Is the council satisfied with the level of communications and responsiveness by Green Square Accord to residents when they have a complaint? Thank you.
Councillor Linda Smith?
Yes.
Okay, Councillor Falweber, do you have a supplementary question regarding the Brownfield Development Grant application? No? Councillor Rowell, as you have 4 questions to the Cabinet Member, I will ask you for supplementary questions in turn. Firstly, do you have the supplementary regarding the landlord registry?
I have no supplementaries for any of my 4 questions.
Okay. Finally, Councillor Jeffrey Marbini, do you have a supplementary question regarding Castrol Crescent garages?
Yes, please, just the timeline.
Yes, please, just the timeline would be helpful. The answer doesn't give a timeline. Thanks.
I don't have a precise timeline. The survey work into the approximately 200 small sites is taking place. We want to have that ready so that we're ready to learn from the work on small sites, that we are progressing and able to take advantage of any future investment or funding opportunities. But I don't have any timeline I can give the councillor right now beyond that.
Councillor Rahman, would you have a supplementary question regarding community centres? Okay, and we will now have a break until 7 o'clock. Actually, because it's before 6:30, we're going to proceed to item 12, outside bodies reports. Okay, so we now come to item 12A, outside organisation report for the future Oxfordshire Partnership. Can Councillor Susan Brown, Leader of the Council and Cabinet Member for Inclusive Economy and Partnerships, introduce the report?
Thank you very much, Lord Mayor. I'm happy to do so. So annually we bring reports to Council on all of the partnerships that we take part in, and I've brought, as a member of the Future Oxfordshire Partnership, reports in previous years on this particular august body. This year I'm doing it as the chair, because the chair alternates around the leaders of the various different councils that make it up. So what you have in front of you is the annual reports of both the Future Oxfordshire Partnership and also, for the first time, the Oxfordshire Inclusive Economy Partnership, which I think this council can be particularly proud of, because it's really come out of a lot of work that we did as a council in that space. And it's spreading a lot of the really good work that we have done as a city council in terms of trying to push an inclusive economic agenda, from everything from the Oxford Living Wage to trying to make sure that employment practices of employers across the city and the county are good ones and are genuinely inclusive to people who might be quite far away from work and need a bit of extra support. So There's some really fantastic work being done through the Oxford Inclusive Economic Partnership, but it sits underneath the Future Oxford Partnership, as does quite a lot of work, including the work that we have done together as councils across Oxfordshire on tackling zero carbon, and the various different sort of subgroups that sit underneath that body, whether it's the Housing Advisory Group, which up until this year I chaired, which brings together housing leads across the county to discuss issues that are of common interest, and wherever we can find common space to talk about how we can get more affordable housing and better housing delivery in terms of modern methods of construction and so on. Whether it's the Planning Advisory Group, which has just reformed itself and is now again trying to work closely together on planning things, or the Environment Advisory Group, which is doing some really important work, trying to make sure that all the time we're not sort of doubling up work, because there are various different bodies working in this space. So we've got the Zero Carbon Oxford Partnership. We've got PASCO, which also sits underneath this, which is the county-wide body on this. So there's a lot of good work that's being done, and I think that there's a lot of interesting things in the report, and I'm very happy to answer any questions.
Okay then, do any members wish to speak on this item? Councillor Miles.
Thank you. I should note that I am chair of the Scrutiny panel, and so I'm aware of some of the issues that have been coming up. I'd first of all really like to extend my thanks to Councillor Brown and also the officers here that have been supporting the chairing of the FOP since July this year. I think FOP Scrutiny in itself has contributed to many of the recommendations, and I know people in the room here have been part of that, and so that has really, I think, strengthened, for instance, the refresh of the strategic economic plan in terms of ensuring it's sustained, related to the sustainable development outcomes that the FOP seeks to achieve. There are two challenges that I just want to raise, and more, they're not questions to yourself, but just say that the room is aware of some of the issues that are coming up from the scrutiny side. One is around the late delivery of some of the documents, which is out of the control of the officers in this room and Councillor Brown, but just quite often there isn't sufficient time for the panel to have adequate oversight and review of the documents, because they come the day before the actual meeting itself, and they're quite voluminous. There's a lot of them. And then the second issue that has emerged is different levels of expectations regarding the role of the scrutiny panel for the FOP, and its relationship in terms of, in terms of both the purpose, in scope of the evolving role that the FOP plays. And so the main issue there is what's in scope of scrutiny. Is it simply the agenda items before the committee for each meeting, or whether the panel is able to provide scrutiny more broadly on topics that are related to the role of partnership working between the councils and how these areas contribute to sustainable development overall. So that's sort of where the tensions lie at the moment, and that has created some challenges. It hasn't stopped recommendations being put forward and then being taken, but I just think it's important that we're aware that that is an issue, and hopefully as we go forward in the next municipal year, some of these challenges will be resolved as it becomes clear what the role between FOP and FOP scrutiny is. So maybe Councillor Brown would like to reflect on that, but I think it's important that we acknowledge that as a change.
Councillor Brown, would you like to respond?
Yeah, I would, thank you. And I'd certainly like to thank Councillor Miles for her work as Chair of Scrutiny, which I know has often been challenging. So, I'm also aware that there is a review proposed into the remit of scrutiny, and I think, to be honest, I think it hasn't been as clear as it could have been in terms of the kind of the framework in which you have been working. I think where it has become increasingly problematic is where scrutiny has chosen to comment on matters which are partnership working, but which aren't really under the remit of the FOP. I mean, I think the could be a case for FOP scrutiny to be talking about things that are under the remit of FOP but not necessarily on the agenda. But if they're not even under the remit of FOP, then I think we have got ourselves into a bit of a pickle, and I think that's where we are in terms of the last lot of recommendations, which were therefore not accepted by FOP. So I think it's right that there is a review of the FOP scrutiny coming up. I think we all need to find a better way of working on that, because it's frustrating for scrutiny if they end up with discussions which are then not really going anywhere because FOP can't take them. So I think it's right that we need to get that in a place. I am concerned to hear about the late arrival of papers. I wasn't aware of that, so I will take that up with the officers of the FOP who, as you I think alluded to, are not actually officers of this council but of a different council. So we need to make sure that that's not happening, because that's not fair to you and it's not fair to other members of scrutiny. So we're going to take that away.
Thank you. Councillor Sergeant Malik.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. My comment and question is around this net zero carbon reduction, etc. Partnership. The partnership is very important. But given the views and the decision of the Mayor of Manchester on the ZEZ, where he says there's no scientific evidence to do the reduction of the zero emission zone, which obviously our council, your farmer left won the award on it, etc., which I always believe it was a congestion charge rather than ZEZ what it stands for. So would you consider withdrawing your support because there's no scientific evidence where you can basically reduce carbon emission around the city centre? Would you agree with the Mayor of Manchester? If not, why not?
I have to say I have literally no idea what you're talking about. I'm sorry, I just don't understand where those comments are coming from. So, do I think that we need to take action in the city to tackle emissions? Absolutely. Do I think that it's the remit of the work of the Future Oxfordshire Partnership to do that? No. It basically does not come under Future Oxfordshire Partnership. So there are plenty of opportunities to ask about transport policy. Most of them would be at the County Council, and I would suggest that they get put to that body rather than to me answering as chair of the Future Oxfordshire Partnership.
Sorry, Lord Mayor. Can I just come in? Yeah, no, I appreciate that, but you are our leader and you represent us as a partnership. When you said you don't know...
Okay, then. I think it is what the Councillor Susan Brown is saying, that it's got nothing to do with the report. So if there's any further follow-up, I would kindly request you to email.
That's fine.
Is that okay? Thank you. Does anyone else have any questions? Because I am looking out for you. Okay, so members, can we note this report and move on to the next one? Yeah, okay. Thank you, the report's been noted. We now come on to item 12B, the Scrutiny Committee Update Report. Can Councillor Lucy Pegg, Chair of the Scrutiny Committee, introduce the report?
Thanks. Thank you, Governor. I'll start by saying, first of all, thank you for the rest of the committee for all of the work we've done. This report covers the beginning of October to the end of the year, so it doesn't cover any meetings we had so far in 2024. And also thank you, as always, to Alice for all of the work that she does supporting the committee. Scrutiny's met 3 times, plus we had an extraordinary remote meeting in December. Housing and homelessness has met twice. We've had 1 meeting of finance and 1 of climate environment, and the companies panel has joined 1 shareholders and joint ventures group meeting. We've also, as well as the substantive items, we also had a discussion and agreed how we would change this makeup of the standing panels to reflect the establishment of new independent groups on the council.
I'm not going to go through all of the things that we looked at in that period. There are far too many, and probably if you want to look at it, you can go and see the detail in the report. But I'll just highlight a few that might be of particular interest. We looked at the Local Plan 2040 Regulation 19 consultation documents. We raised many of the same issues that were raised in full council, such as the identification of district centres, provision of healthcare infrastructure, and we had discussion of viability policies. We looked at the equalities monitoring report, which I think some of the equalities work was alluded to earlier, and there was lots of excellent stuff in there. We also had questions around ethnic minority pay gaps and trajectories of staff from ethnic minorities. And we looked at the interesting action plan put together following the LGA corporate peer review, and we asked some questions about prioritisation of actions and the way that the council would be addressing the challenges raised by the LGA. Housing and Homelessness has looked at reports on the City of Sanctuary accreditation, looking at how that linked with the inclusive economy work and whether that was an approach that was embedded across the council. Finance has been looking at the budget. It looked at it before Christmas. It's now obviously looking at it in a lot more detail in Budget Review Group, which thank you to all the members of that for the incredible amount of work that they've done over the last few weeks. And the Climate and Environment Panel discussed, amongst other things, the Biodiversity Action Plan for Oxford City Council's parks and nature areas, the 2023 review, asking questions on things like right tree, right place, mainstreaming the action plan, and the relationship with ODS.
Thank you. Do any members wish to ask any questions? Okay then, shall we note that report?
Yes.
Yeah, thank you. Your report has been noted. So we will now take a break until 7 o'clock. Please can members return to the chamber ahead of this time. Thank you. Please, members, take seat. We now come to the public addresses and questions. A total of 45 minutes. Nice to know you're all awake. We now come to the public addresses and questions. A total of 45 minutes is allocated for this item. David, can you please bring in the first public speaker? Our first address is from Isabel Tucker. Welcome. You have 5 minutes to make your address.
Hello everybody. Thank you very much for having me here at this meeting. I'm going to speak on the subject of Gloucester Green Market, and I'm going to give you a slightly shortened version of my speech to fit into your 5-minute time limit. Oxford's historic charter market, now operating at Gloucester Green, used to be run by Oxford City Council. However, since 2013, the operation of this market has been outsourced to a company called LSD Promotions, and in March 2023, Oxford City Council decided to renew their contract following a re-tendering process. The new contract between LSD and the Council has not yet been finalised, and I am here today to urge you not to sign it. This market has declined markedly since it was operated by LSD. They shouldn't be allowed to run our market any longer. Why do I say this? It's because the market has become dominated by street food. The street food is clearly the most profitable part of the market, but the rest of the market should not be being neglected. The Saturday market, a general market, isn't so much a concern, but Wednesdays were the day on which local people might do their shopping, because fresh food and household goods were sold then. However, we've lost a huge number of these stores. Why has a vibrant and popular market with lots of potential declined so badly? One reason is that the fees have gone up considerably since LSD took over. A basic store on a Wednesday at Gloucester Green costs a minimum of £38. Compare this to the cost of a store at Whitney, which had been £3 if you want a canopy. One trader who comes on a Wednesday pays £55 to install at Gloucester Green, but £10 at a market in Wiltshire. It looks very much as if LSD won't run the market the way the council intends. Through a Freedom of Information request, I got a redacted copy of the council's draft pre-tender specification, their statement of requirements, and LSD's tender. Obviously, the council wants this market to contribute to its strategy and objectives, most relevantly, thriving communities and inclusive economy. The documents make it clear that the council wanted market days to be properly themed and differentiated, but there's little sign of that at the moment. There's quite a gulf between what LSD claims it will do and what it is doing at Gloucester Green at the moment. In response to your statement of requirements, it says on page 14 that there is a huge range of fresh food and products with inspirational recipe ideas, when in fact there are only a small number of stalls selling fresh food and the range is narrow. There are no recipe ideas on offer. They cite a fabulous selection of stalls offering a huge variety, when there is a preponderance of jewellery stalls and not much variety. They don't explain what they mean by urban mixed style, and anyway, this seems to be in conflict with the council's desire to have the weekday markets properly themed. In their answer to question 7 on page 17, LSD says that they welcome sellers with fresh organic fruit and vegetables, whereas in practice, they discontinued the farmers' market that used to operate at Gloucester Green and made it impossible for traders selling organic produce to continue. They also intend, apparently, to welcome sellers of the finest essentials and wholesome specialist food and drink products. There is currently one stall on a Wednesday that sells expensive pâté, cheese and wine, but little else in this regard. I have consulted widely with other local residents, and a great many of them miss the old market and object to seeing their market run down by a private contractor. Here, for example, is an extract from one response. Gloucester Green Market has definitely lost most of its useful stalls over recent years. Not long ago, I remember that the Wednesday Gloucester Green Market sold a much greater variety of fresh food. Ingredients, not just street food or ready meals. Lee's cheese, for example, is much missed, and I know several people who no longer bother to go to the market now that he is no longer there, selling affordable and varied cheeses, both British and European. There used to be stalls selling spices, jams and pickles, and several bakers with good bread. A butcher's van too, and game in season. I would definitely like stalls like this to come back. The council needs to consider other ways of running this market. Councils up and down the country are finding good ways to run their markets, and Oxford City Council could perhaps learn from them. I urge the council not to sign this contract, and to reconsider the decision to outsource the operation of this market to LSD. The people of Oxford deserve a better market than this. Thank you.
Thank you for your address. Please stay in the chamber for a response from Councillor Susan Brown.
Thank you, Lord Mayor, and thank you, Isabel. Obviously, we've discussed this many, many times, and I'm well aware of your views about Gloucester Green Market. I would say I do think they are views as opposed to facts. During the last 10 years, Gloucester Green Market has grown from a small market operating on 2 days a week to operating over 4 days a week. The number and range of stalls has grown significantly, as have the number of visitors. The bulk of that growth has happened since the current operator, LSD Promotions, took over the running of the markets 10 years ago. And as I think you referred to, it is the case that we have agreed to renew the contract with LSD, and we agreed that nearly a year ago. Since the pandemic in 2020, which had a significant impact on the market, occupancy rates have been steadily increasing, and that growth is in line with or just above the national trends supplied by the National Association of British Markets and the National Market Traders Federation. As an example of that growth, these are the average store numbers per week. In September 21, there were 151. In September 22, there were 176. and by April 2023 for 192. So we are clearly seeing, however, a shift from the older, more traditional market stall uses to more demand for new uses, such as street food, coupled with entertainment and experiential uses. This is common to markets and shopping experiences up and down the country, and I mean, I think there is a clue in the name market. It does respond to market trends. It's a nationwide trend shift, not just in Oxford. And there is no doubt that street food is one of the largest growth categories, but the number of stalls dedicated to street food still remain less than half of the total market stalls, and therefore cannot be classed as a dominating category. An average Wednesday market still has two very large stall holders comprising of 10 stalls, each offering fruit and veg, 2 stalls selling bread, 2 stalls of cakes, 1 stall for cheese and 1 fishmonger. As a result of the changing trends, our market operator is currently drafting a leasing strategy for letting of stalls like the one we have for the covered market. And this will set out their target mix of uses going forward, which will be in line with national trends and demands of the local community. The loss of the farmers' market stalls was disappointing. The main reason for this was the lack of interest from stallholders. LSD tried a number of initiatives, such as promoting on social media, investing in new stall covers to differentiate and highlight the farmers' stalls, all in an attempt to get this category re-established. However, it is also worth pointing out that farmers' markets and organic produce is often more expensive and often competes with the high demand for lower priced produce. And I think we would both agree that we'd like to keep prices down at the Gloucester Green market. Stall rates increased in October 2022, which was the first increase in 3 years, and amounted to an increase of £2 per stall per day for non-food operators. Food and beverage stall holders incurred an additional £2 increase for electricity. This increase was as a last resort to cover some contribution towards the increases in waste collections and utilities. Stall rates are variable depending on the type of stall. So, for instance, street food versus standard stall use, and depending on which market day, to reflect demand. It is a market. Standard rate stalls range from £15 to £45 a day. Food and beverage stalls range from £48 to £65 per day. And in both cases, there are reduced rates for regular stall holders and those occupying multiple stalls. Comparing Oxford stall rates with those of other markets such as Witney and Chipping Norton are not a true like-for-like. Smaller market towns have a fraction of the footfall and are not comparable with central Oxford. Having said all of which, I think the prices do actually compare very favourably. A stall at Gloucester Green on a Friday, which is the newest market day, starts at £26, and that seems to me to be a very reasonable stall rate. And I think it would be hard to match that in any other city market of a comparable size to Oxford. A market is a great opportunity for anyone with a business idea to establish themselves and make that first step on the business ladder. They can test the water with minimal capital outlay, allowing them to identify their customers and refine their business model. Many businesses that started in Gloucester Green Market have gone on to establish themselves elsewhere in the city and beyond. One example is Taste of China, who now trade from the covered market after having first tested their business model and products at Gloucester Green. This is because a market like Gloucester Green is able to react more quickly than any other type of premises to change in consumer behaviour and the broader environment for business. For example, 15 years ago, there was a single convenience supermarket in and around Oxford city centre selling fruit and vegetables at affordable prices. Now there are more like 10, something that is bound to impact on the nature of the goods sold at the market. Similarly, the number, range and type of delicatessens, clothes shops and hot food outlets has changed to a huge extent. The fact that sellers at Gloucester Green have been able to respond to these changes with new products and offers is exactly why the market is so successful. LSD supports a number of community initiatives, some linked to the old fire station where free stalls are provided. They also provide free stalls on Arts Fridays, providing 30 free stalls over the period of October to December last year. And in addition, they support young traders as part of the Young Traders Market National Initiative and heavily subsidise stalls to Lazy Sunday, which is a local community initiative, and the Jericho Street Fair. So we have, as I mentioned really right at the beginning here, spent a significant amount of time responding to concerns and allegations about Gloucester Green Market from yourself, Isabel. And yet there is no supporting evidence that this is the case. We meet regularly with stallholders and so do LSD, and we have a number of contractual terms, including KPIs, which require LSD to report quarterly on their performance against these. I'm skimming slightly over my response here because it is very lengthy and I'm happy to publish it in full. But I do want to say that it is a requirement that our market operator work collaboratively with all stakeholders, including the public. And I am also aware that LSD have reached out to you twice in the last year with an offer to meet in person to discuss your concerns. And as so far you have not accepted this opportunity, I do suggest that you want to do that as a positive step and way forward. Thank you very much for your time.
Our second address is from Kat Hobbs. Can you hear me? Our second address is from Kat Hobbs, who is unable to attend. A written response will be provided. David, can you please bring in the next public speaker? Welcome. Our third address is from Emma Jones, who is deputising for Diana Volk. Welcome. You have 5 minutes to make your address.
Thank you for hearing me tonight. My name is Emma Jones. I work for Asylum Welcome. I'm speaking on behalf of Diana Volpe and Kat Hobbs, who are unable to attend tonight, regarding the award of the Oxford City Leisure Service contract to Serco. Additionally, I represent many people, over 1,100 petition signatories today, who do not feel represented by their elected representatives. On Diana's behalf, I'd like to make the following points. Serco Leisure is part of Serco Group plc. Serco Group plc has gained a dubious reputation as a leader in the business of running immigration detention centres for profit. This is a business model that invariably seeks to drive down costs to the terrible detriment of people subject to immigration control, resulting in Serco's dismal track record on human rights. Serco's lowlights include, but are not limited to, cases of accommodation filled with rats and cockroaches and sewage-filled sinks, terrible allegations of sexual abuse by Serco staff at Yards Wood Detention Centre, culminating in a highly critical report by HM Inspectorate of Prisons in 2015 that branded the Serco-run detention centre a place of national concern, systematic denial of abuse and degrading treatment, even in the face of over 100 migrant women going on hunger strike to protest these conditions. Allegations of Serco's appalling mistreatment of vulnerable migrants are not limited to the detention estate. According to a report by Open Democracy last year, Migrant Health recorded 369 complaints regarding asylum accommodation managed by Serco. These complaints included serious allegations of racism and filthy conditions. On Diana's behalf, I ask, do you not see a fundamental contradiction here between Serco's well-documented abuse of asylum seekers and refugees and Oxford's repeatedly asserted aspirations to be a local authority of sanctuary? The public feels strongly about this decision, as evidenced by the fast-growing petition arising from the news of this contract and the people who demonstrated outside the Cabinet meeting last week. We understand the difficult position councils are in, and we've listened carefully to the arguments made both in Cabinet and in correspondence, but we don't accept some of the things said, and many of our questions have gone unanswered. Above all, there is the question of whether ethical considerations were taken into account as part of the decision-making process, and if not, why not? By proceeding with this contract, you are essentially sending a message to our community that it's acceptable to partner with a company that exploits migrants while claiming to be a place of refuge. We think that Oxford City of Sanctuary deserves better.
Thank you. Thank you
Thank you for your address. Please stay in the chamber for a response from Councillor Susan Brown.
Sorry, thank you, Lord Mayor. So thank you for your address and raising your concerns about the Cabinet decision to award the leisure management contract to Serco Leisure. It's important to note that Serco Leisure Operating Limited has not been implicated in any reports of the nature referred to in point 2 of your statement, and the Council can only consider the behaviour and performance of Serco Leisure Limited as the bidding company in its assessment of the bid. We cannot consider issues raised relating to other companies in deciding a procurement outcome. We want Oxford to be a place where everyone feels welcome, and we remain committed to our work supporting refugees and asylum seekers and celebrating the contribution they make to our society. I do also note that Birmingham, a city of sanctuary, has also got Serco as its leisure contractor. Following a transparent and competitive process which has fully complied with procurement policies and legal requirements, Serco Leisure presented a bid that matches the priorities of the Council while also driving investment in improving quality within our facilities, which includes new gym equipment. They are also committed to delivering a range of concessions which include free swimming for under-17s and will create a circa 60k local inclusion and access fund to help more inactive people to become physically active. Serco Leisure are one of the country's leading leisure operators, and they are the current UK pool and spa water leisure operator of the year. They also manage Stoke Mandeville Stadium, the birthplace of the Paralympics movement, national sports centres such as Bisham Abbey and Lillis Hall, and, as I said earlier, also Birmingham's. The appointment of a leisure operator is a legal process that follows procurement law and is not open to political intervention. Serco Leisure's tender scored best against the Council's criteria, which included qualitative and financial elements with an emphasis on qualitative, and which we are legally required to respect. Thank you for your statement.
David, can you please bring in the next public speaker? Our next address is by Mariam Ahmed. Welcome. You have 5 minutes to make your statement.
I'm speaking here today to emphasise the draconian anti-boycott bill that is currently in the House of Lords. This bill outlines the stopping of businesses, organisations, including those affiliated with Israel, being targeted through ongoing boycotts by public bodies. I and many members of the public feel this is a flagrant disregard for the democratically institutional rights that this country emphasises. I'm sure everyone here is aware of the UK's government in the South African anti-apartheid movement that gathered pace in the 1960s, which gained the support of the United Nations General Assembly with a call for economic measures, including the boycott of South African goods. By 1985, a total of 121 local authorities adopted a statement in some respect to South Africa. Whilst the UK government continued to resist, when Nelson Mandela addressed the UK Parliament in 1966, his most fulsome thanks was not for the wisdom of the UK government, but it was for the British people. Instead, it was the millions of Britons who, through the years and like others elsewhere in the world, stood up and said no to apartheid. I see history unfolding in front of my eyes in a cruel way, with Britain once again being on the wrong side. There is a clear lesson to be learned from the BDS movement in South Africa, which seems to elude us all. I ask that in the same vein that Oxford City Council paved the way for leading historical change, I ask that this council be the pioneer for change so history books and the people of Palestine can look towards Oxford as a beacon of hope. To channel the notion and ideas that are taught within the university, to place those within reality. I see no hope if we do not internalise these learnings and move forward to not repeat the mistakes of our past. History books do not look fondly on Britain and its legacy of empire. It is hypocrisy to champion democracy, free speech, whilst in the same breath opposing the very means by which citizens can exercise this right. As a young person, I feel the government's increasingly despotic actions as isolating a new generation of enfranchised youth who are aware of the hypocrisy and corruption in state institutions. I ask you to remember that a large cohort of young people will make up the cohort of voters who will be voting in the next general elections, and these young people are thirsty for change. They are sick of the democratically corrupt politicians who will turn up to debate about their salaries but will not turn up to debate about a genocide. Disgusting. I ask if you truly believe in liberty, democracy, and you hold these values true to oppose the anti-boycott bill, to listen to your moral conscience and do right by the people, to allow Britons to exercise their democratic right to boycott. I ask that Britain write itself positively in the history books for once.
Thank you for your address. Please stay in the chamber for a response from Councillor Susan Brown.
Thank you very much for another very eloquent speech, Marion. And I'm sure you're aware that we have an item on the agenda, a motion that we will be discussing shortly, and I hope you will be pleased with the outcome of that debate. But I think we all have a great deal of sympathy with what you've said.
David, can you please bring in the final public speaker? Our final question is by Chaka Artwell. Welcome. You have 3 minutes to ask your question.
Without enduring any opposition, criticism or debate, the Green Councillor's motion for female sanitary products to be made available in Oxford City Council's male toilets was approved at last November's full council meeting. Oxford's biological male population has no biological use for the functionally designed female sanitary product. Therefore, Councillor Rao's motion is a City Council approved flagrant waste of public money to endorse the current left-wing culture wars and uphold Stonewall's LGBTQIAP2S evangelical creed. Will Oxford City Council reverse its decision to waste public money by purchasing female sanitary products for display in male toilets? Will Oxford City Council oppose the biological deception for politically correct reasons of requiring biological human beings by their self-assigned gender ad hocly arrived at any given morning?
Okay. Thank you for your address. Please stay in the chamber for a response from Councillor Brown.
Well, I think it is actually.
And you should be assaulting me either.
It's worth a response.
You don't care. Mayor, Sheriff,
okay.
Former.
We're going to have to ask you to leave.
What are you? You're in the county and the city.
Please, can you leave if you're going to carry on like this?
I'm talking like that to me saying I'm not good, it's not good in response.
Would you like a response or not?
Give me a response.
I'm trying to give you a response. If you would just be quiet for a minute, I'll give you a response. I hardly know where to start because there are so many misconceptions in the actual question. There are, for a start, the motion that I think you're referring to was passed in July 2022 and was about the provision, the free provision of sanitary products within our buildings and community centres, not in men's toilets but actually in women's toilets. In November, there was a follow-up question from Councillor Pegg, which I answered in Council about exactly where they were being provided, and we listed the places, and I will read you out the response that I made at the time. We've provided free products in the toilets of most of our community centres since August 2022. The products are displayed in the toilets alongside a poster that has information about who to contact if someone needs more products. Staff in our community centres will check when products need replacing and contact a distributor when they need more products. We haven't managed to reach all of the community centres as yet, but there is a plan in place to get products into these locations as soon as possible. To fund the project, Oxford City Council used a combination of facilities budget, contribution from the Federation of Oxford Community Associations and the Household Support Fund. We also work in partnership with a number of partners and organisations to distribute products across the city in community centres as well as the community groups. We share a donation box in one of our local Tesco stores with the Wings Project. The Wings Project is a part of the Young Women's Music Project, and we also take open products which Wings are unable to use to reduce waste. Since the project began, we've had really positive feedback from members of the public, such as, I didn't know you did this, what a great initiative, and I'm really pleased to see this. The products are well used and people are reaching out if they are in need.
Thank you. That is the end of the public addresses and questions. Okay, now we move on to item 13, motions on notice. Please note that the item has a time limit of 60 minutes, starting now. Councillor Jaffrey Marbini, could you please move your motion?
Lord Mayor, I'd like to amend my motion without notice, changing the C action point to read C, right to the right to boycott campaign, expressing Oxford City Council's opposition to the anti-boycott bill. So I want to thank Councillor Chris Jarvis. Without whose work, this motion wouldn't be here before you. The anti-boycott bill is a major attack on local democracy, which seeks to prevent public bodies from making ethical choices about spending or investment. Michael Gove has unified nearly 70 civil society groups focused on Palestine, the Uyghurs and climate change against this bill. This is a foul threat to our civil and democratic rights. If passed, it would prevent Oxford City Council from choosing to cut financial ties with companies known to be engaged in human rights violations or environmental destruction around the world. Had it been in place during the 1980s, for instance, it would have forced local authorities like our council, as well as our two universities, to do business with the racist apartheid regime in South Africa. Oxford is an outward-looking city and proud of its international links. Many people in Oxford care deeply about human rights and the environment and would be horrified to think of their money being used in unethical ways. They expect the City Council and representatives to uphold the same high standards. Oxford and our residents have long-standing links to Palestine via cultural, educational and medical links, hence being twinned with Ramallah. Two of my friends and medical colleagues, Professor Nick Maynard and Dr. Debbie Harrington, recently returned from Gaza, where they witnessed exceptional violence and the systemic destruction of the healthcare system by the Israeli forces, describing extensively burnt men, women and children, often with no access to morphine. Extremely worryingly, the building Nick and Deborah stayed in and slept in whilst in Gaza, which was being used by the next international medical team, was targeted and bombed a week after they arrived back home. Israel is shielded from accountability for its crimes and as such treated exceptionally and has been for decades. So much so that Michael Gove is acting to shield this plausibly genocide-committing state from peaceful movement, as the Americans have done in the US via specific legislative mechanisms revealed by The Guardian. In one fell swoop, Gove is undermining our local democracy, gagging our freedom of speech, and as identified in the bill, granting Israel impunity for its violations of international humanitarian law, whilst it plausibly commits the grave crime of genocide as ruled by the International Court of Justice. Israel will be granted exceptional, never-ending impunity by this bill, whilst it's unleashing exceptional levels of violence, and Israeli ministers are expressing exceptional rhetoric of genocide and ethnic cleansing, including at a rally in Jerusalem just this weekend. Thousands of our residents have attended protests, vigils and signed petitions demanding an end to the violence. The government should be urgently calling for a ceasefire and for international humanitarian law to be consistently upheld, and those who have committed crimes to be held accountable, not legislating to silence those of us trying to use democratic means like boycott and sanctions and divestment to press for peace and justice. Please support this motion. Thank you.
Is the motion seconded?
It is, and I'll reserve my right to speak if that's okay.
Thank you. Are there any other members who wish to speak on this motion? Councillor Mike Rowley, please.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I'm sure there are different opinions around the room about the wisdom of boycotting Israeli goods or indeed of any other particular boycott, but this motion doesn't ask us to do that. This motion asks us to oppose an attempt to place restrictions on the ability of local authorities to represent local communities in what's already the most over-centralised country in the developed world in terms of governmental structure. It's interesting, I find it interesting actually that the draft bill that's currently going through Parliament refers to the occupied Golan Heights. The Netanyahu government, of course, denies that the Golan Heights are occupied territory at all, having declared them annexed. I'd like to think that this is an example of the government holding a principled position on the occupation of Palestinian territory by the Israeli armed forces, but I suspect that it is it's in fact a reflection of the fact that the drafters of this bill know little about Israel or Palestine and care less. Rather, the bill is an attempt to create another bogeyman in local politics, another culture war, isn't it? We can't. Somebody has said to Rishi Sunak, we can't possibly win an argument about the economy, the NHS, or public services, public transport. So let's talk about boycotts and public toilets. Maybe that will take a bit of attention away. Well, if the government wants to create a culture war with Whitehall and the Carlton Club on one side and our diverse local communities up and down the country on the other, I say bring it on, because I think I know who will win. I would urge everybody, whatever their view about the appropriateness and efficacy of boycotts in general and boycotts of the Israeli government in particular, I would urge everybody to support this motion on the principle that local communities have the right to be represented, and the representatives of local communities have the right to debate these matters, hear from local citizens as we just have, and act in accordance with their conscience.
Thank you.
Lord Mayor, a point of order. I believe you've skipped over the amendment, which hadn't been withdrawn as of yet. My understanding was that the proposer intended to amend their own motion. Is that the case?
Sorry, yes, that's what I meant, yeah. That I am amending my own motion, yeah.
Okay.
Yes, Councillor.
In that case, I won't move the amendment.
Thank you. Okay, Councillor Jabrun Ali, would you like to speak?
Yes. Yes, so it's just a quick reflection on what this motion means. The not supporting a motion which is calling for boycotting countries that are proving to be extremely arrogant in terms of human rights is extremely dangerous for this democracy. If we do not support this type of boycotts, it means draconian regimes, whether you feel that Israel is a right or not, they can get away with calamities of genocides. There needs to be a threat in terms of what governments do. They need to understand that there are laws that are there, but also members of the public can advocate for sanctions. Even companies can withdraw from those countries. So I would like to really support a strong motion that sends a message. One of the most successful things about the South African boycott anti-apartheid era was the fact that we had the strong support of the Labour Party then. As I said, when I was resigning, one of my favorite MPs was Dennis Healy. He went to South Africa. They advocated for boycotting the apartheid regime. So I would like to see a strong message sent to countries
that are brutalizing their communities. They are trying to force ethnic cleansing on the world. We are living in a very, we're living in a state of fear at the moment. We need a world that has a peaceful resolution. We need to exist with our neighbors. Thank you.
Councillor Jafari Mabini, would it be possible if you can just clarify the amendment?
Yes, of course.
To the motion.
Yes, I would like to amend the motion so that point C of the action points is replaced with right to the right to boycott campaign, expressing Oxford City Council's opposition to the anti-boycott bill.
Thank you. Councillor Smoten.
I didn't have my hand up, but I do have a speech, so good coincidence. I'll take it. Liberal Democrat policy on this calls for promoting trade links with Israel and Palestine, but that illegal settlements represent a breach of international law, and that any UK trade which bolsters such activity sustains that breach. It's a nuanced policy. You certainly can't write it on a podium, but I think it's an issue that demands great care and demands nuance. I think we have to take very great care to ensure that we target illegal activities specifically, and not Israeli or Jewish-owned businesses more widely. But where illegal settlement is being supported by UK investment, we should act, and the government's proposed bill would make that impossible. Leila Moran MP described the bill as purposefully divisive. She said ministers were, in her view, purposefully stoking division when we should be pulling people together. I think that's right. For the bill's proposers, I don't think this is about whether or how Israel ought to be held to its obligations under international law. Rather, it is a bid to ignite another culture war, in the desperate hope that amidst the chaos resulting, they might cling to a vestige of power. We need a government that is squarely behind international humanitarian law, and it is my enduring hope that by the end of the calendar year, we'll have one. But not yet. And in the meantime, we need to keep for ourselves what tools we have to exert influence for good. Councillors, please support the motion.
All right then. Councillor Alex Hollingsworth, please.
Excuse me. I support this motion because I believe it is a fundamental right that everyone should be able to express opinions and take actions and then be held accountable by democracy or the law when exercising that right. I've always believed that, and I have never supported anything that restricted that right, whether it was government edict like this or no platforming speakers whose views I happen to disagree with. It is important that councils can express opinions and are held to account for it by their electors. If the electors don't like the opinion the council has expressed, they can vote them out, just as they can individual councillors. Sometimes those opinions can be popular, and sometimes they can be brave and ahead of their time. Think of campaigns on the great social changes that our society has seen since the 1960s, access to abortion, the decriminalisation of homosexuality, and, as has already been said, the anti-apartheid movement. But crucially, sometimes we as individuals will agree with those opinions, and sometimes we as individuals won't. The principle must remain the same. There must be a right to express them. Increasingly in recent years, we've seen loud voices on left and right arguing that only opinions that they find acceptable should be allowed to be expressed. The irony of Tory cabinet ministers arguing that freedom of speech means freedom to say only things that we agree with seems entirely lost on them. But so is the irony of those who claim to be progressive, saying exactly the same thing when it comes to opinions that they don't like. Whoever it is, self-appointed groups who believe that they and they alone can decide what voices can be heard, what opinions can be expressed, what speakers can be heard, are the antithesis of what I believe and what I believe lies behind this motion. I urge members to support it and then to apply the principle it stands for to everyone, even when we disagree with them, because that's the true test for all of us.
Very good. Is there any more speakers, please? going? Oh, Councillor Imogen Thomas.
Just because it hasn't been mentioned yet, I wanted to thank everybody that gathered outside in protest in support of this bill and against everything that's happening, the absolute atrocities we're seeing in Gaza at the moment, who have been part of many such protests in the past. And just in the spirit of Councillor Hollingsworth talking about making sure that we're all held to account by our electors, I did want to say there were a surprising number of people using the level entrance rather than going through the main doors and engaging with those people. And there were also many people who did join the protest or did talk to the residents that were taking part in it. But I would really encourage everybody to use every possible opportunity to listen to their electorate and hear why they feel so strongly about this, and why they came out in their huge numbers to support this motion tonight. I think it's really important. But I just, as somebody like Councillor Nala Hartley that was born in South Africa, I just know how important it is that we don't lose the freedoms we have to be able to hold, to boycott, to have these ethical boycotts, and to be able to use our power to address crimes against humanity. So I really urge every single member to vote in favour of this motion.
Thank you very much. Councillor Ed Mundy.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I just wanted to point out as well that obviously there's a very famous success of the boycott movement getting the change that's needed in South Africa, but there's a long history, of course, of boycotts having an impact in both international and national realms and with companies and so on. So it's certainly something that can be very successful in a very important way. It has been hinted at earlier as well. I think we should make very clear that this bill, this anti-boycott bill that's now in the Lords, doesn't just stop us actually having a policy of boycott, divestment and sanctions. It actually inhibits us, or anybody representing the council in a vocal sense, even talking about doing so or expressing a desire to do it if it did indeed become legal, which is a very strange thing to be imposing upon us, and it's unlike anything else that I've seen really. So, I think we need to oppose this on democratic grounds, as we've said. And also it's making an absolute exception of Israel and the occupied Palestinian lands of the Golan Heights and the Palestinian territories. And it's making that as an exception beyond any other country in the world, but it couldn't possibly be exempted from this policy. So it's, I urge everybody to back this motion, and I hope that we do get a unanimous vote.
Councillor Shaista Aziz, please.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. First of all, I'd like to start by thanking the councillors for bringing this motion to the Chamber. The reason why I decided to put my hand up to speak is because I agree with everything that's been said in the Chamber this evening, but I do think it's really important for us to understand very clearly that this isn't just about process and democracy, which clearly is under threat here. But it's really vital that we understand that the boycott, divestment, the sanctions movement seeks to end international support for Israel's oppression of the Palestinians. And we are hearing this motion this evening while the context is beyond horrific. More than 27,000 Palestinians have been killed. As we've already heard, medical facilities, hospitals have been wiped off the map. And we are seeing the most horrific politicisation going on of basic human rights and the rights of Palestinians to live, and to live with dignity, and to live with security and safety. And so I do want to raise this point one more time, because I think in terms of the debate that's taken place this evening, we should really emphasise that this is an issue that has direct impact on people's lives as we speak and as we sit here. And I think it's important to emphasise that. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there any other speakers? Councillor Jarvis.
Thank you, Lord Mayor, and thank you to everyone who spoke in this debate. I think it's pretty clear what direction the mood is going in this room. I just wanted to make a couple of quick points before we wrap up the debate. And I think, to my mind, there are two very clear reasons why the Tories are seeking to drive the anti-boycott bill through Parliament at this current time. The first of it, which I think it needs stating, is that the Tories have a total disdain for democracy and for local government. This bill is coming through in the context of the last 15 years of Tory government, which has seen the introduction of the Lobbying Act, which has clamped down on the ability for campaign groups to lobby for change, the most draconian anti-union laws in Europe, attacks on the right to protest, the introduction of photo ID at voting stations, the devastating austerity imposed on local councils, and so on and so on. The Tories absolutely despise democracy, and they're doing everything they can to shrink it. And the anti-boycott bill is just the latest example of this. The second reason I think that the Tories are trying to push this through right now is because they want to undermine the solidarity movement that exists in this country with the people of Palestine. That solidarity movement that we've seen not only outside this council chamber, but on the streets of Oxford, the streets of London, the streets of cities up and down this country. The people of this country stand with the people of Palestine, and it's absolutely sickening that this legislation is being pushed through at a time when Israel continues its horrific bombardment of Gaza. More than 27,000 people have now been killed. That is more than 1 in every 100 people in Gaza. And not only does our government refuse to use the leverage that it has to secure a ceasefire, they are now seeking to limit public bodies from using their leverage to bring an end to the occupation of the West Bank and the siege on Gaza. And this is, as others have said, history repeating itself. Just as the Tories sought to clamp down on the movement against apartheid in South Africa, they are now seeking to clamp down on the movement against Israeli apartheid. And this council and this city has a proud history of standing up against injustice and of standing up for democracy. We should do this today by supporting this motion and saying no to the anti-boycott bill.
Thank you very much. Councillor Jeffrey Marbini, would you like to summarise?
Thank you, Lord Mayor, and thank you everyone for your speeches. I do agree with a lot of the points raised, though I have to agree with the councillors who just spoke about the fact that this is not just about democracy or process, it's also about the fact that there is absolutely exceptional levels of violence that is live on all of our mobile phones, on our numerous medical groups where we hear from medics live on the ground. And the levels of violence, I'm just going to have to reiterate some of them. 2 mothers an hour are being killed every single hour, 2 mothers. And we don't really hear from feminists complaining about that very much. Over 10 children having 1 or both legs amputated, many without anaesthetic. I have anaesthetised people for amputations, and it's a horrific thing to go through, even with an anaesthetic. And imagine being a child and going through that. A colleague in Gaza messaged us to say that a few weeks ago he was shot within an ambulance whilst he was with a patient, in his back and in his leg, and he has still not had treatment for the shrapnel that is lodged in his legs. So this is the level of violence that is being inflicted. So there's exceptional levels of violence, there's an exceptional rhetoric of genocide. The get-together that I spoke about, the rally, about a third of the cabinet ministers, of Israeli cabinet ministers, were at this rally. I just want to raise one point that undermined the two-state solution since the Oslo Accords. That's been going on with comments like, on the 20th of January from Netanyahu, I will not compromise on full Israeli security control over the entire area west of Jordan and this country to a Palestinian state. And even peaceman Rabin talked of less than a state when it came to Palestine. So I urge you all to join the boycott, divestment and sanctions movement. At the Bodleian Archives, we have the Anti-Apartheid Movement Archive, which contains materials from its beginnings of the movement in the late 50s and to a few years until its dissolution in 1994, and the end of apartheid in South Africa and the end of apartheid in Israel, which will also come. So they were integral to bringing down South Africa's apartheid regime, and the same tools are absolutely crucial in the fight against Israel currently too. And it just, I'm going to end with Naomi Klein's words in The Guardian. I don't know whether many of you must have read that brilliant article. She wrote, "The responsibility." So if you don't know her, a Jewish writer who writes a lot on climate justice, extremely active, brilliant woman. The responsibility is particularly acute for those of us whose governments continue to actively aid Israel with deadly weapons, lucrative trade deals and vetoes at the United Nations. Vote for this bill, vote for this motion even, and join our movement. Thank you for supporting the motion.
Thank you. I will now take a vote on the motion. Please can I ask that members keep their hands raised until I indicate otherwise. Those in favour? Those against? Any abstentions? Thank you. The motion has been carried. Okay, moving on. Councillor Latif, could you please move your motion?
Thank you, Lord Mayor. 39.39%, 40.26%, 37.59%, 38.95%, and 36.52%. These are the percentage of voters who have turned out for the last 5 citywide local elections. And if you look at recent local by-elections, the turnout falls to just 33%. The numbers don't lie. The electorate are disenfranchised and do not feel that this city council fully represents their views. Let's be honest, there is widespread discontent amongst the electorate in this city. You're all the same. You don't care about us. What has the city council ever done for us? These are the words that some of you, I am sure, will have heard on the doorstep. The feeling amongst residents is that decisions are made for them rather than with them. Sometimes by elected local officials who don't even live in Oxford, or may make decisions that have a significant impact on their lives, sometimes while serving on 2 geographically distinct local authorities. Too many decisions are made by a select few individuals who do not and cannot adequately represent the diverse communities of Oxford. The culmination of this is that while we have the 3rd most diverse city in the southeast of England, there is only one cabinet member who is visibly from an ethnic minority background. And so it is incumbent on all members of this council to find a better way forward for the residents whom we serve. We can and should look to the experience of other cities such as Bristol or Sheffield, who have moved towards a committee system of representation which better reflects views across their respective cities. This would prevent a model where the full responsibility for a significant portion of council business lies with just a single cabinet member. And why don't we start as we mean to go on? Let residents have the say. Let's put it to residents in a city-wide referendum. Let us have council officers work on the finer details and bring it back to this council chamber. We should not be afraid to hear and reflect the wishes of residents who will finally have a chance to say how they wish for this council to be constructed. This would allow a less centralised and more collaborative way of working. It would lead to a more transparent modus operandi for this council, which would restore the trust of residents in the local democratic process. It would re-energise civic society and allow us to show residents that we care and that we can represent them. I hope that you will all join me in hoping for a different and better way of working. Let us create a more inclusive city that truly represents the fullness of diversity amongst us, and let us ensure we are truly serving the residents of this great city. I encourage all members to support this motion and hope it may be passed unanimously. Thank you.
Is the motion seconded? Yes. Councillor Shaista Aziz, do you wish to speak now or at the end of the debate?
At the end of the debate, thank you, Lord Mayor.
Are there any other members who wish to speak on this motion? Councillor Andrew Gant.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I'm grateful to the Council for bringing the motion and having this important debate, but I won't be supporting it today. I've not worked in a committee system in a council. I know there are colleagues here who have, and I have
have been in a working group on another council which looked at this, which also included colleagues who have worked in both systems, one of whom memorably described the committee system as like wading through mud. I am agnostic, I'm open-minded about this, but I'm not convinced. And it's about running an organisation efficiently, frankly. It is about practicality. The motion talks about a better way for decisions to be made across Oxford. And I find myself asking, which decisions, what decisions can wait for a monthly or quarterly meeting and be made better? And where are the synergies between different policy areas coordinated? No policy exists within a single bubble. They all interact with each other, not least in budget terms. In practice, what happens is you end up giving more authority to the chair of the committee, indeed of the motion policy. Indeed, some accounts of this system refer to a sort of over-committee of committee chairs, which sounds a bit like a cabinet to me. It is simply a more efficient way to run a complex organisation, the current system. It also ensures that the council, or the administration of the council, speaks with one voice because there is a place for it to decide what that voice should say. What happens if one committee pulls in a different direction from another, as would inevitably happen because each committee is focusing on its own policy area. The current system ensures the cabinet members are bound into collective responsibility, or at least it is supposed to. The motion talks about a better and more transparent way for decisions to be made across Oxford. Well, we could do that. In fact, we used to do that. There used to be regional planning committees. There used to be area committees, all of which have been whittled away but could be restored. The process of change is tortuous and expensive. The motion starts by deploring the level of turnout in local elections, and by the way, 40% is actually not that bad, and ends by calling for a referendum. How many of our fellow citizens would be stirred from their armchairs to take part and vote on such a massively thrilling subject as the precise structure of local government? And face it, friends, who wants another election in the next 18 months? The motion seems to be a bit of a catch-all, as if an administrative change would on its own solve a range of issues including voter turnout and diversity of representation. And I'm not convinced that it would. And finally, let's be clear, resource is limited. A referendum, an internal document, this takes time, this takes money. This is not the moment to do it, not least because we all hope we're about to have a change of government. Let's wait and see what that government wants us to do, will allow us to do, and will fund us to do, and then look at it again now.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Anna Rowton.
Thank you very much, Lord Mayor. So this council punches way above its weight nationally and among all scales of local government. We win a lot of awards and others look to emulate the innovative things that we do. The reason we punch above our weight is because we do a lot of stuff, we do a lot of interesting stuff, and we do it well. Doing that is a function of capacity, money, velocity, and accountability. I will attempt to argue here today that the committee system would constrain this council on each of these fronts. This very council ditched the committee system a quarter of a century ago, along with nearly every other council of every size across the UK. Naturally, I thought I would do some due diligence and ask those around them why that was. The answer, it is very expensive, you need many more large committees, and it is slow. In this era of severe financial constraints on local government, I ask, if we do this, what will we not do instead? What services will we not deliver to the people of Oxford? You say, what has this council done for us? Well, it could be a lot less. I was particularly amused by the inclusion of Sheffield in this motion. I wonder if those who voted had actually talked to anybody there, because I have. They took a year to transition and had to bring in a number of specialist officers to do so. I reiterate, even the cost of transition and referendum alone is staggering. You are literally talking hundreds of thousands here. So again, what are you not going to do? The message from Sheffield was, and I quote, avoid at all costs. I thought it would be interesting to think about recent things we've done that would probably not have happened under the committee system. The Energy Super Hub is one such thing, in my opinion, a quite non-standard, large partnership which came about because officers had capacity to act when such opportunities came along. It was risky, it involved large sums of money, it is not a normal thing for a council to do, less than a council of our size to do. I don't even know how such a project would have made it onto an agenda, under what committee, let alone through the system in time. Instead, somebody, my predecessor, went for it, was accountable for that decision, and boom, we have an award-winning project that is now being replicated across the UK. Which brings me on to the accountability point. The idea that a committee chair has the same level of accountability as a cabinet member is quite frankly ludicrous. You know, everybody here knows that the chairs of planning and licensing, etc., do not have that accountability that cabinet members do. Difficult decisions require accountability. Without that, this council will slide into very risk-averse decision-making. We'd effectively make ourselves into a sleepy Tory district council when nothing much happens. Finally, the short circuit you want with respect to decision-making you disagree with already exists. One, we are ultimately beholden to the electorate, and two, you can call a vote of no confidence in this administration, which you have not or could not do. To summarise, what you're proposing here would mean slower moving, unnecessarily bureaucratic, less accountable, less innovative, more financially constrained council that did a lot less with the money and capacity that it has. I think this would be a huge shame and not in Oxford's best interest, so I wholeheartedly oppose this motion. Thank you, Lord Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Ross-Smith, please.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Thank you for that speech, Councillor Redfern and Councillor Gant. A lot of what I was going to say has been said by both of you, but I will admit that when I first became a councillor in 1991, a long time ago, I actually, yeah, admission here, I actually had to enter politics in a committee system, and I had 4 years in opposition in that sleepy Tory place called the Vale of Whitehorse District Council, as it was. It's no longer that, of course, it's gone to the den, thankfully. But we had, I applauded the Blair government coming in, and we also then saw a change, which was from central government, about how local government should organise itself, and the cabinet system came in. So I was lucky to experience 4 years as an opposition member in a committee system. There were a few good highlights because I was very determined to get things changed at the council. But it took a long time. I'm talking 4 years in opposition in the committee system. And it wasn't until we changed to the cabinet system that I actually managed to get a lot of things changed very quickly. We all did. And it became a much sharper focused, more efficient council as a council. And I would say, please don't go back to the committee system. At County Council recently, we have had a look as well at doing a change to the cabinet system. And it came to the conclusion that it would be just a slug, basically. Slow moving, very dirty, and not very pleasant. Except if you're a hedgehog. So please don't change to that system. But I would like to echo a plea from Councillor Grant. We had area committees once upon a time, and some of those area committees made some very good decisions because they allowed members of the public for that particular area to come and speak to their local councillors, and there was a two-way conversation before decisions were taken. Now, I think that apparently some of the committees did not work so well in all areas of the city, but I actually would like to see perhaps a return to that. Maybe not monthly meetings, but maybe quarterly or even yearly meetings would be nice. But think on that. So thank you, Lord Mayor. Please vote against this motion.
Councillor Tom Hayes, please.
Thank you. I have not been a councillor for nearly as long as some people in this chamber.
Yeah, sit down and put your mic on. Yeah, sit down and put your mic on, please.
I think my time starts fresh. I have not been a councillor for nearly as long as some people in this chamber. Indeed, I was 8.
Can't hear him. Can he sit down and put his mouth near the mic?
I'll sit down.
Hey!
For the third time, I've not been a councillor for as long as some people in this chamber. I was 8 when you first became a councillor. Hear me out. Hear me out. But I think the fact that we've got such longevity of service and such experience in this chamber is an extraordinary strength. And having served in this chamber for nearly 10 years, I've had the role of deputy leader, I've had the role of cabinet member, vice chair of Scrutiny, chair of the Scrutiny Review Group. But I think the role which is probably the most important is just that of councillor. And when I think about some of the people over the last 10 years that I've served with, whether I think of Jean Fuchs, whether I think of Craig Simmons, whether I think of Jill Sanders or of Val Smith, I think of people who were doers, extraordinary people who were able to make change happen whatever the structure, because they had the will, the capacity and the passion to drive change on for the city that they loved. And so I would say that why would you try to fix a problem that doesn't exist? You have in this culture an open collaborative culture. You have in these processes an open collaborative processes. Why would you try to spend critically important time trying to transform what we do when what we do is already very good indeed? And I just want to close because we've heard about diversity and inclusion. Diversity and inclusion comes in many forms. I'm a gay man who grew up in a council estate as a preschool meals kid, caring for 2 disabled parents who got to be deputy leader of Oxford City Council. I think, from my own perspective, that is an extraordinary thing that I could never have imagined happening. And when I look to the Cabinet, we have huge diversity of experience, knowledge and background, and I don't think that we should ignore that. So I just want to close by saying that this is a council which has achieved great things. It's filled with doers on all sides, and we shouldn't try to embrace a transformation that's failed in Sheffield and Brighton just for the sake of the catchword of transformation. Let's focus on who the real enemy is here. It's the government. It's the Conservatives who are destroying people's hope that a better future is possible. And let's go and win that general election, and let's, with the Labour government, do even better in the city of Oxford.
Okay, Councillor Ed Turner.
Thanks very much, Lord Mayor. My reflections are, when I think of the challenges facing our council at the moment, clearly the one looming large for me is around the very, very difficult financial climate, and it really has to be all hands to the pump in dealing with those. We've got a crisis in terms of homelessness and housing in our city, and we witnessed that most obviously in terms of pressure on our council with the request for temporary accommodation. I know many of us are addressing really heartbreaking items of casework. We've got significant portfolios of assets in the housing revenue account, in the general fund. We've got to maintain those. We had some discussion of that earlier. Invest in them. We've got to meet our obligations, which we've stated in this chamber, to address the climate emergency. We've got terrific health inequalities, awful health inequalities in Oxford. We don't control all of the levers there, but as a council we've resolved to do what we can. And of course we have our Oxford model, and our Oxford model has served us well. And we've got our companies and they're successful, but I think all of us would say it's always going to be a journey about how we work out relationships with council, where we've got the companies that we own that work to us, and we wouldn't necessarily always get that right. So we've got these huge things to do, and I'm just not sure that I would say to our officers who are working with us to address these really big challenges, what we need now is a big change to our internal governance. I just don't see that helping move us forward. And it's not just me that thinks that. If I turn my attention to our recent LGA peer review, I'm looking at its observations. It says the council's a good employer. It says the capability of members and officers is widely held in high esteem internally and externally, and people trust in the leadership. It talks about positive relations between members and officers. Those are just some of the headlines. It was also, I think rightly, very complimentary about scrutiny. It made some recommendations, for example, on that relationship with the companies. We should take those forward. But the fact we had a group come in from outside to look at this, where the direction of travel was very different to the one being urged in this motion, I think is potentially significant. I'm always up for looking again at governance. I've got to be honest, when I was involved in this council 15, 20 years ago, I used to be really sceptical about scrutiny. I've come around to a different way of thinking. I think it really, really adds value. I lament the area committee's demise much less probably than Will Smith, but that's about different experiences. Quite a lot of money was spent on quite a lot of meetings there, and when I think about the outcomes, I don't necessarily think they worked. But in terms of this particular change, it would be a huge change, it would be a costly change, and just in the situation we're in at the moment, I don't think it would be the responsible way to ask our officers to spend money, so that's why I can't support the motion.
Can I just say, I've got over 11 people to go to speak next. Is it possible if everyone could speak as brief as possible if you want to get through? So the next person is Councillor Susan Brown.
Thank you. I'm really brief then. So I also came onto this council when it was still being run under the committee still, and I can only concur with those others who have previously spoken to say that I don't think it works well. I don't think it's a healthy way for people to really get engaged in policy making as members. And it's very, very slow and it's not cost effective. I also just wanted to challenge some of the remarks that were made in the opening speech by Councillor Latif, because he was presenting a whole load of perceived problems, some of which I would agree are problems, including election turnout, but as if this was the solution. I mean, I have to say, I knock on doors all the time in this city, and nobody has said to me, the thing that would really make a difference for me is if you introduce a committee system, and that has just literally never ever come up. But I did just do a bit of quick Googling to see if, as a result of having moved to the committee system, turnout had improved in areas which had done that, and no, it hasn't. It's fallen. So I don't think I'd draw a conclusion either there that the committee system was driving turnout down, but equally I can't see how on earth you can make a connection between turnout and the form of governance in local councils. So I will leave it there. Thank you.
Councillor Mary Clarkson.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Yes, I mean, a lot of it's been said, and while I'm slightly more of a spring chicken perhaps than Councillor Ross Smith, not much, I too came in with the committee system, and what I think it did was it encouraged silo thinking, and what we need now is a cabinet where people can think much more widely across a range of things as things change quickly. I think it makes for more effective decision making. Susan Brown's already talked about turnover, and yes, in Bristol, after they went back to the committee system, turnover went down. Equally, in Oxford City, we had a higher turnout, in 2002 before we moved over to the cabinet system than we do now, which would seem to, we had lower turnout then than we have now, which would seem to suggest that the issue of turnout has got nothing to do with the system. The one good thing I thought about the committee system was it did enable new councillors to become experts in certain areas. And I think that is something that we do need to address through more training. But I don't think that the committee system is necessarily the best way to address that.
Thank you. Councillor Smerton.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I'll start in the traditional way. I haven't been on the council as long as Sam. I was 5 when Councillor Smith first came into council. Anyway, I would like to take this opportunity actually to strike a note of agreement, which is I do take the advice of my colleagues behind me as to the merits of the systems that they have greater experience of, and especially the people who served in a council using that system. So I will oppose the motion as it's put forward to us today. I'd like to note there's a kernel in there that I'd really like to support, and that is that if you have a council that is in a no overall control situation, it is right that when difficult, controversial decisions are being made, that a consensus-building process should take place. I would just argue that there are other tools that can be brought to bear to achieve that outcome. For example, electing a leader who in turn appointed a politically balanced cabinet is a way that you can do that. That is a somewhat higher friction way of doing things than if you just appoint a minority administration that calls all the shots and then we have an election in 4 years. But I do think it is more democratically right that consensus building does take place like this. But the time is not right now, and that's because we are staring down the barrel of an election very shortly. So I think what we have to do is get through the elections in May, find out what situation we're in, and if the answer is that we're in a no overall control situation at that point, then I think we ought to pick a leader and thereby a cabinet that represents several, perhaps all, of the parties that are in front of us. That's a consensus building task, and I think that's a task that we should undertake at that time. One last note, turnout. A guessing game. It's a Liberal Democrat saying it. What's the way to increase turnout in local elections in the UK? Ed is wrong, and somebody on my left is right. There we go. PR is indeed the answer, yes. PR would mean that every single vote in the city counted for the composition of this council. I haven't done the maths, but you know how it looks for the UK as a whole when you look at all the safe seats, all the people whose votes couldn't possibly have mattered. Let's make that less. That's the way to get turnout up. Every vote must count.
Councillor Azar Khan.
Thank you. When I looked at this motion, I wanted to understand what's the rationale behind it. Is it trying to devolve the powers? Is it involve all the backbencher councillors? And then looking, area committees being talked, it was the Liberal Democrats set it up, and I served in one of the biggest, yes, it was 2002. Yeah, you was leader, so I served in one of the biggest area committee, which was the Northeast 12 councillors. The problem with this council, especially in this administration, is, and I would address that, the way we try to treat people, the way we try to act. Since this cabinet, this Labour administration, I only went to once or twice to speak to the cabinet, because in a way they really insult you, and they say you don't have the right to speak. You only spoke to once. Shut up in a way. And when the people come here to speak, we have seen tonight how the heckling happens, and it is the problem here is not the cabinet or committee, is about the public engagement and how do we engage them into the decision-making process and the local councillors' involvement. Liberal Democrats always worked and wanted to a very much a devolved system. That devolved system was there under the area committee, but the Labour administration wanted to keep all the powers back to them. We had 3 or 4 scrutiny committees. Where are they? Only one scrutiny, no area committee, one person who is a very regular comes and attends this chamber, and then on the budget meeting, last budget meeting I did say the leader was missing. There was no single person, and the deputy leader looking at the Twitter or the Facebook said there are 3 people or 2 people, including leader, watching on the YouTube. So that's the involvement in this administration. That was the last budget council. So it is not a committee system, it is the system which is run by some individuals. So we have half council up for election, change the people. Change the people and then to change the system. That's the best way of doing it, is not spending thousands of pounds now and trying to approve motion which might be council is not in position to find the money and do it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think I've only got time for 2 more people. So it is Councillor Ejaz Rahman on the list next.
Thank you. Up until Councillor Carnsport spoke, I thought it was the Labour lived and loving state, which I find a bit surprising. One thing would have changed. Serco, maybe if everybody was involved a lot earlier, we would have known, and I don't necessarily agree with the outcome, but you know, we would have felt more involved, we could have had a discussion a lot earlier. As opposed to what Councillor Rayton said, if she fancies a vote on no confidence, we can try that, but one of the reasons that we didn't is because of the cost to this council, not because of anything else. It only takes 12 councillors to do that, so if you like it, you can just let us know. It's not a problem at all. Going back to my colleagues on the right-hand side here, I just want to read out something to you. There are a number of different models for the governance and structure of councils, with cabinet-based systems becoming preponderant. The danger of this model is that a small number of majority group councillors can have all the executive power, with most backbench councillors and all opposition members relegated to purely scrutiny roles. We think there are clear advantages in the committee-based system, which gives every councillor a meaningful role in participating in the running of the council. This also gives a more effective voice to opposition groups since the Localism Act 2011. I could go on, but that's the your policy 2018, Liberal Democrats policy paper. So if you'd like to read that again, that'd be good.
Thank you. I know there's a lot of members who want to speak, but you know, seriously, 2 more people and I've got to carry on this moving. So, Councillor Linda Smith, please.
Thank you. I'm not as experienced as the other Councillor Smith, nor as youthful as Councillors Smoten and Hayes, but I was first elected as a councillor in 1998 to an authority that had a committee system. It was also, very sadly, a period of no overall control of that council, and I think there is a particular danger. I really hope Labour sweeps the board in the elections in May, and we're back running this authority with a thumping majority. But there is a particular danger when there's no overall control, when you get people refusing to step up and take responsibility, rotating committee chairs, you end up with unaccountable councillors, unaccountable officers, and a high risk of failing services and a failing council. So I think what we've got right now is much better with the cabinet system and with the split between the executive and scrutiny. So we should stick with what we've got and start concentrating on the things that matter to people out there on the doorstep and stop navel gazing.
Thank you. We've only got 4 minutes, so I'd like to go to Councillor Shaista Aziz to...
Just to say that if we're not going to listen to everyone, that it hasn't been a balanced debate. It's been very focused on against, and not really that many people speaking in favour. So it would be good to hear the other side of the argument as well.
Yeah, let's have a fun. Let's finish it off, please.
So, Councillor Imogen, Thomas, and then I'm going to go to Shaista Aziz.
I've been on the council for 5 years, and I really think that this is interesting for me because I work in the NHS and I've worked in lots of different institutions. I find this council particularly bad at actually taking any feedback. So it seems that in our medical world, if something goes wrong, we have a meeting and we all discuss what went wrong, and someone might say, actually, you should have done this differently. And we say, yeah, actually, you're right about that. I need to think about that. Go away, have a think about how I would do that differently as an individual next time round. But there seems to be just a huge amount of defensiveness here, which means that there aren't any changes in process that might have made things more democratic. I want to give you a couple of examples. So actually, other councillors who have been on scrutiny, including some cabinet members who were briefly on scrutiny, did mention that there is actually no way of making sure that recommendations that are made by scrutiny are then followed up. We don't get feedback telling us whether a change that has been, a recommendation by scrutiny that has been agreed, has been actually fed back and actually enacted on. We have no way of knowing whether that's occurred, and we have no way of following that up. And secondly, is it okay if I continue?
Yeah, carry on.
So, secondly, decisions are made extremely last minute, with papers presented late, even when I was in Labour group, and we are told that unless a unanimous decision is made to put forward, to agree with the paper that's already been written, that there will be huge cost implications for the council. Now, I don't think that's a particularly democratic way of either running Labour group or running the council. I really think a bit of humility and humbleness and hearing what other people are telling you and why there might be numerous reasons why turnout is low, but clearly this is lack of humbleness and humility is one of them.
Okay, Councillor Shaista Aziz, would you like to...
Could I propose a procedural motion to suspend standing orders till we finish the debate?
Yeah, do that, please. Come on, we're having fun. Let's finish it off.
Yeah, can we have a second now? You're on the list. Take a vote. Let's take a vote. All those in favour to continue, please raise your hands. Please keep your hands up. I've got my speaker list. You're on it. Okay. Those against? Any abstention? Okay, so that's been carried. So the next person on my list, Councillor, is Well, that was meant to be Councillor Imogen, but obviously you passed it to Councillor, you have to wait your turn. Councillor Chris Jarvis.
Thank you, Lord Mayor, and I won't keep everyone long because I know that we've just finished standing orders. But seeing as we're playing Top Council, will start by saying that I was 18 months away from being born when I sat on council was first elected. So I don't have the longevity of experience to have sat through the committee system in any former councillor. And indeed, I was still reading picture books when Councillor Smith, the other Councillor Smith, was on a council in somewhere else. I just have a couple of points I want to make. Firstly, I think an observation on the debate that we've had so far. To my count, we've had, I think, more than 10 councillors speak in favour of the current cabinet system, and all but 3 of those who have spoken in favour of retaining the cabinet system are currently cabinet members on this council or another one, or were until very recently. That's just an observation that I think might be useful to reflect on. And the second thing I'd just like to say is Councillor Raymond has eloquently described what is the Liberal Democrats' actual policy position on this issue that is in the inverse of what they've decided to articulate and presumably vote on in this chamber. And I'll finish before letting other colleagues speak by saying the committee system is fundamentally about opening up the council to be more collaborative, more democratic and more deliberative. I think that's fundamentally a good thing, so I'll be voting for the motion.
Okay, so next on my list is Councillor Alex Hollingsworth.
Thank you very much. I was first elected to this council in 1994, and so I will not be, I hope Councillor Rossmith will not use my youth and relative inexperience against me, to paraphrase one of the great speeches. So I have direct experience of the committee system. People have outlined some of the drawbacks with it. When I was first elected, we had a system here where a committee made a decision. If the council didn't like it, the council would send it back to the committee. We had a debate about Northgate Hall, which came to this council chamber, I believe, 6 times, 6 successive meetings. It was referred back to that. It was a great opportunity for those of us who practice our public speaking. It achieved almost nothing other than to bring this whole council's democratic processes into disrepute. One thing I will say that the committee system has going for it is not that it increases public engagement. Members of the public did not come to committee meetings. It increases the number of meetings. It increases the number of meetings that councillors have to attend. It increases the number of meetings that council officers have to look after and manage. It increases the cost of doing business. It also ensures that those meetings happen quite often during daytime, because that's the only way you can afford the council officers. So what it starts to do is it starts to radically tilt the balance of councils, and councils like the one Councillor Smith was first elected to in 1991 are exactly this, and you can see them still. They are dominated by the retired. They are dominated by those people who can afford the time to attend the meetings, to sit in the meeting. It makes the process of representation less, not more. So I would urge you robustly to vote against this. As the person who actually instigated the area committee system, sadly disparaged by Councillor Turner, we don't agree. I personally would like to see some element of that back. I also do training sessions for the LGA on the benefits of scrutiny. I use our scrutiny system and some of the great successes that it has had in terms of changing policy, and I think particularly of the review of B&B properties in the aftermath of the Bullfinch case, which was one of the most powerful pieces of scrutiny work ever done in any council in this country, and use that as the kind of examples of how scrutiny can work. And all of that would be swept aside by reverting to the committee system. We have a good system, we can make it work well. Please don't waste taxpayers' money on navel-gazing, changing it for the purposes, for the pleasure of changing it. It achieves very, very little.
Councillor Imogen Thomas.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Yeah, so am I sold entirely on the committee system per se? No. Do I think that internal governance in this council is working? Absolutely not. I've been a backbencher in Labour group, I've been a backbencher outside of it, and I've been a cabinet member in Labour group, and the difference between those roles is just striking. I think there is a real problem with the dissemination of information. I think there's a real problem with transparency. I think that we're really lacking in sharing the local expertise that ward councillors have with the cabinet members making decisions that affect those wards in good time for it to actually mean anything. I've felt with so many votes that there was a gun to my head because we were so far down the process by the time that I got to say as a backbencher that there were massive cost implications. There was only one responsible choice to be made, which is no choice at all. And I think that we're also misrepresenting this motion. I wouldn't like to see a referendum on this personally, but the motion doesn't actually call for that. It does say it has a view to one potentially in the future, but that would be subject to the reports. And that is the process that I think would be helpful. And I absolutely echo what Councillor Jabari Medini has said about this council being far too defensive, far too unable to just look itself in the eye and scrutinise its processes. I think it could be a healthy process for this council to have a report into a committee system, yes, but it's just reflecting on the principles of how we do things, how decisions are made, how we skill up new members. And I know that those of us that started in the pandemic, that was mostly us teaching ourselves, which is not good for the public that we represent. We need high-skilled councillors, we need better skills for backbenchers and more transparency for the public. And I think it could be a really healthy process, really, for us all to see a report that asks some of those important questions.
Okay, and our last speaker is Councillor Saad Malik.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Amar Latif spoke about engagement and basically not the interest of the people, but how about for all of us to be honest to start with? You know, the people, when they say you're all the same and we're not interested, what we write, what we believe, and be straight with the electorate to start with. You know, if you look at the last Labour manifesto, they supported the LTMs. I've never seen any leaflet where they said, we are supporting the LTM. They said one thing and done the other thing. So equally, when you look at it, I don't know how the committee system works, so I never worked on it. I've been councillor since 2004, but area committee was a very good engagement. When you have anything coming up, you leaflet, you go to the people. That was the one way to engage the public. And people, I was a member of the area committee, it turned up on the many issues, big numbers. We used to have a full hall. The problem it was the power politics. I mean, people can say anything. I'm not going to talk down the Labour group, how they function and how they do it. But the issue here is, that time was a political decision making, because when I was part of that group, so I was one of the shadow cabinet member non-portfolio, because you used to have 8 from the administration and 2 on the shadow. Obviously, when the number increased, power speaks. That's what you call politics. And they took the other 2 off, and they just occupied the whole 10 places. So for that reason, but Liberal Democrats crying for the stuff, majority, opposition is dead. There's no vision of the city. This is why these people are running away with the numbers, because when the people see there is no alternative. And the other thing is, no disrespect to all of this, I've been elected twice independent on the independent ticket. I'm really an independent councillor, and I have went against very organised labour machinery twice. And the reason is, be honest, do your work. Somebody said they were the doers. There are many doers, but also there are people on this side who jump on the winning gravy train and think, oh yes, we are the Labour people. But there's a lot of hard work on this side, the people who fight the IWCA and the Green and the other groups, and they value more this side. Somebody just turning up on and seeing the winning machinery thing. They're the king and queen of the castle. They're the people who were sitting in the living room when the people are fighting the Green and the IWCA. So the point is, if you want public engagement, be honest with the people, bring down the area committees and you see the engagement. That's why the people turn up at the council, what exciting things you have. Because you have so much majority, you can overrule anything you want. But it's the job of the other groups to get the message out and say, look, and be brave. Elections coming, whatever is your manifesto, put in your leaflet. Be honest, be brave. Don't say one thing and put another thing in the leaflet. So if you would have put it after winning, we were all for the LTNs, but you wasn't. Not everybody on the two.
Thank you. Thanks a lot.
Thank you very much.
Councillor Shaista Aziz, would you like to speak now?
Yes, I would. Unless there's any other councillor who wants to talk before me.
And that's because time now, and then Councillor Latif.
Great. So first of all, I'm really proud of the fact that we brought this motion to this chamber, and the reason for that is the status quo needs to be challenged, and in many ways the way the discussion has been conducted speaks volumes about why the change needs to take place. We're looking to create a system where there is a horizontal power structure, not a hierarchy of power. This means that hopefully we can get more of the residents' voices heard in this chamber. And frankly, as much as people want to say residents are heard, they're not being heard. There's a lot of disillusionment out there, and anyone who suggests that that's not true, I would challenge that hugely. I'm also very curious about the observations I've been making this evening about the nostalgia and the in-jokes that have been taking place between different sections of the room here. And that also really speaks to power, and it speaks to those people who are used to having power and holding power and not being questioned, not being challenged. Let's address the elephant in the room. I'm usually quite good at doing that, so I'll carry on. Since October last year, 10 Labour councillors have resigned, and they've crossed to the opposition. Overwhelmingly, we are all new councillors. Overwhelmingly, we are diverse representatives of the local democracy. And I think that speaks volumes as well. Also, Councillor Tom Hayes, I'd like to really challenge you when you talked about diversity on the Labour bench. No one is suggesting there is a diversity, but I was talking specifically about racial diversity. So I'm not suggesting there is no other type of diversity. But really, I want to bring this back to the residents of our city. You talked about other forms of diversity. I just wanted to put that down on the table. So I think the problem here is that when the status quo is challenged, people find it uncomfortable. And there are many of our residents who feel very strongly that they are not being listened to over a number of issues, including the transport policies that have been implemented in the city. And from our discussions with those residents, they want to see better representation in the chamber, and they want to see more diverse voices being represented. And as a councillor who has been in this chamber for more than 6 years now, I will be finishing up my term in May. And I have to say, for me, one of the most productive ways of working for me was through the cross-party working groups on homelessness, on domestic abuse. There was also one on child poverty. And what happened there was ideas came forward, they were developed, and I think that is the best way of working. And what I say to people who are used to holding power is that you've got to understand that you don't have all the answers, and actually we need to create a system that, like I said, has horizontal power structures, and therefore is more accountable as well. And I'll just finish up, final point. I absolutely agree with Councillor Imogen Thomas and what you've said. I do think the fact that 10 of us who are new councillors have left well, no longer the ruling Labour group, I think that is something that needs to be reflected on. And if you do get a new cohort of councillors, I would really urge for some of the things that have already been discussed, the recommendations put forward to ensure that voices that are new to this chamber are heard and taken seriously, that is actually put into action for the benefit of the residents of this city more than anyone else. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Just to remind you that this isn't about Labour group, it's about the committee system of representation to increase residents' confidence in democracy.
Yeah, that's what I was
So if you're going to sum up now, it would be helpful if you could keep to that.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Thank you to everyone for contributing to the debate. Particular thanks to Councillor Jarvis for suspending standing orders to allow us to have a more balanced debate. Just 4 very quick points, and everyone's keen to get away. The first thing is people are talking lots of mentions of what the council has done well, and when you do that, you forget what the council hasn't done so well. And I suspect had we had a committee system of working, we probably wouldn't have had a leisure provider chosen with less than 2 months to transition at the end of a 15-year contract. And that is a good example of where a committee system is likely to have worked in a better way for the people of Oxford. We probably wouldn't have had them standing outside our doorsteps and opposing what we are doing and coming to this council chamber to speak. We would allow the people of Oxford to speak and take part in the process earlier. The The second thing is I was equally took the same observation that Councillor Jarvis did about it almost felt like people feel that they might be Turkeys voting for Christmas, and the number of councillors who are actually cabinet members who don't want to move away from a cabinet system of working is quite striking. The other comment I would make is just really about Councillor Rahman and Councillor Jarvis have said quite well about the Lib Dem position on this, which is at odds with their national position, and it almost feels like either because of the time that they've had in national power, or whether because of the positions they've had more locally, that they're almost afraid of being in power and afraid of taking part in a more sticky way of working. And the very final thing is Councillor Rachel wrote and asked me, well, what about the vote of no confidence? Well, I just say to you, it's likely that that's going to come, and I suspect that will be on the 2nd of May 2024, and I'd be ready for that. Thank you.
I will put the motion to the vote. Please can I ask that members keep their hands raised until I indicate otherwise. Those in favour? Those against? Any abstentions? Keep your hands raised. Any abstentions? Okay. What's the vote? The motion is fallen. So we now come to the end of the meeting. Thank you to members for being in attendance, and for those members of public either watching the meeting in person or via the live stream. The next meeting of Council for setting the budget is scheduled for Wednesday the 21st of February 2024 at 5 p.m. Thank you.